When the world fell to a catastrophic demonic invasion, humanity's last hope lay in a dying Grand Commander and a disgraced disciplinary soldier. Given a final, desperate chance to rewrite history, he is sent 10 years into the past, armed only with his memories, a broken sword, and a burning resolve. Amidst the endless downpour, a young soldier named Ronan stands gasping for air. His body is battered, and his face is stained with blood and sweat. Looking around the ruined landscape, he is met only with the silent, cold corpses of his fallen comrades who paid the ultimate price. Suddenly, a towering, terrifying presence looms over him. It is the giant demon Ahayut, a monstrous winged entity with horned features and glowing yellow eyes. This colossal beast has brought nothing but ruin to the world, and now he stands as the final obstacle in Ronan's path. Ahayute floats gracefully above the burning, desolate battlefield, surrounded by falling white feathers. Ronan refuses to back down, gripping his sword tightly. He steps forward through the muddy puddles, staring up at the giant demon with absolute defiance, ready to end this nightmare once and for all. Ronan manages to bring the giant demon down, pinning Ahayut's masked head beneath his boot. The demon speaks ominously, claiming he will soon return to his master's side. But Ronan only looks down with a cold, blood-splattered face, completely unfazed by the creature's parting threats. Standing triumphantly atop the giant's head, Ronan mockingly reveals that Ahayut's demonic allies have already been utterly annihilated. He describes how one of them was roasted alive by a hot-tempered red dragon, leaving nothing but a charred corpse behind on the ruined battlefield. Ronan grins bloodily, explaining that the other demon was sealed away for eternity by the legendary wizard Lauren. He taunts Ahayut, asking if the beast understands that their grand plans have already failed. But the giant demon remains eerily calm, claiming the children of the star share their senses. Ahayute reveals a devastating truth. The demons know their human opponents have also been completely wiped out. Ronan's desperate smile fades, replaced by sudden shock and sweat. He looks across the vast, empty wasteland, realizing that he truly is the last soldier left standing. Refusing to accept the grim reality, Ronan forces a bloodied smile and yells back, arguing that he is still alive and breathing. But the giant's glowing yellow eye stares back coldly, recognizing that Ronan's own life force is rapidly fading and his time is almost up. Ahayute mockingly laments that if Ronan had only realized his immense potential earlier and dedicated his life to training, he would have been a massive obstacle to their goals. Ronan grits his teeth, admitting his life has been a mess, but resolves to end this talk. The giant demon offers a final condescending compliment, acknowledging Ronan as a great human. Unmoved, Ronan delivers a devastating stomp, unleashing a massive explosion of orange and yellow energy that completely shatters Ahayut's masked face, silencing the monster forever. As the demonic energy dissipates into the dark sky, Ronan stands alone in his tattered cape, looking down at the shattered fragments of the mask. He lets out a heavy, exhausted sigh, his body finally feeling the full weight of the brutal battle. Looking over the endless pile of corpses, Ronan is flooded with warm, nostalgic memories of his comrades laughing together in camp. The contrast breaks his heart, and he laments that they would still be alive if a mere disciplinary soldier like him hadn't been forced to the front lines. Standing in the desolate red-tinted rain, Ronan prepares to accept his own demise, but suddenly his eyes widen in absolute shock. He senses a powerful presence nearby, and his gaze snaps forward as a strange energy begins to ripple through the muddy battlefield. Through the pouring rain, a massive, brilliant red aura flares up from the ground, illuminating the dark sky. Ronan's heart leaps with hope and disbelief as he realizes that someone else has survived the catastrophic final clash. With a mixture of relief and sheer panic, Ronan recognizes the source of the energy. He calls out to Grand Commander Adashan, his eyes widening as he rushes forward. There, standing in her blood-splattered red and gold military uniform, is his commander, barely clinging to life. Ronan rushes through the pouring rain, his heart pounding as he reaches his commander's side. Adation is sitting on the muddy ground, her red and gold uniform stained with blood. Seeing her barely breathing, Ronan cries out in shock, relieved but terrified to find her still alive. Adation looks up at him with a weary, faint smile. Despite her critical state, she manages to tease him, pointing out that for a corporal, he does not look much better than she does. They share a brief, somber moment of mutual respect amidst the surrounding devastation. With blood dripping down her forehead and pooling near her eye, Adation asks the only question that truly matters to her. She demands to know if the giant demon Ahayut has finally been slain, desperate to know if their sacrifice bought humanity any time. Looking out over the ruined battlefield, Adation laments the tragic fate of the disciplinary soldiers. Normally, regulations dictate that these fallen outcasts are simply abandoned or burned. With her fading breath, she begs Ronan to ensure they are treated with dignity this time. Ronan looks down at his own bloodied hands, a sad, resigned smile crossing his face. He knows his own body is at its absolute limit, and he could die at any second. The weight of their imminent defeat presses heavily upon his shoulders. He gently touches the massive stone mask of the defeated giant demon. The chilling, prophetic words Ahayute spoke before his death continue to echo in Ronan's mind, leaving him deeply unsettled about the true nature of the dark forces they fought. In his fading consciousness, Ronan recalls a warm memory of a silver-haired woman. He remembers her gentle smile and her earnest wish for him to enroll in the prestigious Philian Academy, a dream that seemed so distant on this desolate, ruined battlefield. His mind drifts to the memories of their previous failures. He remembers a dark, rainy forest from a past regression, where a man in a brown cloak sat desperately beside a wounded woman in red armor, realizing their struggle was a lost cause. Suddenly, a single droplet falls into a puddle, and the ground beneath them begins to shake violently. Both survivors react in sheer alarm as the earth rumbles, signaling another catastrophic failure in their desperate attempt to alter the course of history. A brilliant, golden light descends from the heavens, casting a majestic glow over the chaotic scene. Looking up in absolute disbelief, the bleeding woman realizes with horror that this marks their third failed regression, pushing them to the brink of total annihilation. The cloaked man screams in pure frustration, desperately demanding she use telekinesis to launch him upward. He curses his own weakness, furious that his sword cannot reach the enemies looming high above them, cementing another tragic end to their journey. Back in the present, Adation gazes at Ronan with a grim, deeply determined expression. She recognizes his incredible strength and resolve, knowing that he is the only one who can carry their hopes forward into the next life. Without warning, Adation suddenly reaches out and pulls Ronan into a tight, desperate embrace. Caught completely off guard, Ronan freezes in shock, unable to comprehend what his dying commander is planning in her final moments. Before he can react, Adation forces a glowing blue time regression orb directly into his mouth. Ronan's eyes widen in sheer confusion and alarm as the mysterious magical artifact slides down his throat, radiating a powerful, ancient energy. Leaning close, Adation whispers her final secrets into his ear. She reveals that this is their absolute last chance to save humanity, as the magic of the regression orb can only be triggered a maximum of 4 times. Smiling through her tears and blood, Adation makes a heartbreaking request. She asks Ronan to find her past self and tell her to live a peaceful life as a tailor, rather than suffering the brutal hardships of a military commander. A magnificent, blinding burst of blue magical energy erupts from Ronan's body, shooting straight up into the dark sky like a beacon of hope. The powerful magic tears through the fabric of time itself, carrying his soul backward. As the world dissolves around him, Ronan desperately reaches out, calling for his commander one last time. But the cold rain and the blood-soaked battlefield vanish, replaced by a sudden, overwhelming warmth and a brilliant light. Ronan gasps, sitting up abruptly on a bed of soft green grass under a cloudless blue sky. He looks at his unblemished hands and realizes he has successfully returned 10 years into the past, waking up in his peaceful hometown of Nimbutin. Sitting curled up at the base of a massive green tree, Ronan clutches his head in absolute disbelief. The gentle breeze of Nimbutin brushes past, but his mind is a chaotic storm. He struggles to process the impossible reality that he has actually been sent back in time. Memories of the blood-drenched battlefield flash before his eyes. He remembers the desperate final moments with Grand Commander Adishan. It seemed completely unbelievable at the time, but her wild claims about the magical regression orb were entirely true. He vividly recalls the sensation of her forcing the glowing blue orb into his mouth. Standing there in her bloodied red military uniform, she had given him a heavy, final responsibility. This was no dream. He had swallowed the key to humanity's salvation. Ashan had explained the tragic catch. The orb only allowed for 4 regressions in total, and she had already used 3 of them. This meant Ronan was holding their absolute last chance to rewrite history and stop the impending demonic invasion. To prepare for the horrors ahead, she urged him to enroll in Philian Academy, the Empire's most prestigious training ground. It was a place filled with outstanding talents where he could sharpen his raw skills and become strong enough to change their dark fate. Ronan remembers her bittersweet, gentle smile as she made one final, deeply personal request. She asked him to find her past self at the academy and tell her to live a peaceful life as a tailor rather than suffering as a commander. Back in the present, Ronan panics, shouting in frustration at the sheer absurdity of his situation. He questions what he is supposed to do all by himself in the past. Yet, looking at his unblemished, youthful hands, the reality of his regression slowly sinks in. Peeking out from behind the massive tree trunk, Ronan looks toward the outskirts of his hometown. He spots a group of local troublemakers gathered in a nearby clearing. His sharp instincts immediately flare up as he senses something highly unusual is happening. Ronan gasps in shock as he notices a young boy suspended high in the air. He isn't hanging by a rope, but is held aloft by glowing green magic. Standing nearby is a timid, red-haired girl named Asel, her hands glowing with magical circles. Asel looks deeply anxious and terrified, her face covered in sweat. She clearly doesn't want to hurt the boy, who hangs upside down screaming that he has no money. It is obvious that she is being forced to use her rare magic. A smug, blonde-haired punk named Hans stands next to the boy, cruelly mocking him while emptying his pockets. When the boy pleads about his mother's failing health, Hans reacts with sudden violence, striking the helpless victim across the face with a brutal slap. Hans turns his aggressive attention back to Asel, shouting at her to lift the boy even higher, to the very top of the tree. He wants to break the boy's spirit completely, ignoring the immense danger of the height. Asel hesitates, pleading that she might slip and drop the boy, but Hans barks at her to shut up and obey. He mocks her fear, reminding her that she isn't the one hanging up there, forcing her to continue. Asel is consumed by fear and regret, remembering how she only wanted to show the villagers she was good at magic. Instead, her rare telekinetic talent has made her a tool for thugs, leaving her feeling utterly helpless and terrified. Deciding he has seen enough, Ronan steps out of the shadows. Hans is immediately irritated by the interruption, drawing his sword and angrily accusing Ronan of acting tough just because Hans had purposefully lost to him in the past. Hans lunges forward, swinging his sword with aggressive force. Ronan calmly analyzes the attack, noting Hans's terrible posture and predictable movements. With effortless grace, Ronan easily dodges the downward slash, completely unfazed by the thug's martial display. A powerful, dark aura of a spectral warrior briefly looms behind Ronan. His golden-orange eyes glow with intense focus. He realizes that even though his physical body is much younger, his hard-earned combat instincts and lethal reflexes remain fully intact. Hans grins confidently, pointing his sword at Ronan and demanding he get on his knees and beg for his life. He arrogantly threatens to sever Ronan's arm, but then crosses a fatal line by bringing up Ronan's older sister, Iril. As Hans begins to make a crude, disgusting comment about Iril, Ronan's expression turns ice cold. In a blinding flash of extreme speed, Ronan moves before Hans can even finish his sentence, drawing a simple wooden stick with lethal intent. With a single, clean strike, Ronan physically slices off Hans's ear. Blood splatters through the air as Hans's sword clatters to the ground. The arrogant punk instantly collapses, clutching the side of his head in sheer, agonizing shock. Hans rolls on the grass, screaming in pure agony, while his fellow thugs watch in absolute terror. Ronan stands over him like a cold god of death, his eyes glowing with terrifying wrath as he asks if Hans wants to die. Under a clear, windy sky, the forest clearing falls into a stunned silence. The remaining thugs stare in absolute disbelief at their bleeding leader Hans. They cannot comprehend how a mere kid could move so fast, let alone maim someone with a simple, blunt wooden stick. Ronan looks down at his blood-stained stick with a casual, unimpressed expression. He turns his cold gaze toward the three trembling thugs who are still holding their clubs, asking them with terrifying calm if they are enjoying the show or if they want to join their leader. To drive his point home, Ronan steps heavily onto the groaning Hans's head, grinding him into the dirt. He demands that the thugs surrender all of their stolen money immediately, along with an extra fee for ruining his mood. Terrified of meeting the same fate, they quickly comply. The thugs eagerly hand over their pouches, completely stripped of their previous arrogance. They look incredibly small and pathetic in the wide clearing as they gather their injured leader and scramble away, leaving Ronan alone on the quiet forest path. Ronan approaches the freckled boy who had been bullied and tosses him the heavy pouch of gold coins. The boy is utterly stunned, looking up in disbelief at his savior. He points out that this is far more money than what was originally stolen from him. Ronan dismisses the boy's concerns, telling him to keep it all. He reassures him that those thugs won't have the courage to show their faces around here again. Clutching the pouch to his chest, the boy weeps tears of pure gratitude as Ronan casually waves him off. With the boy gone, the timid, red-haired girl, Estelle, breaks down in tears. She confesses that she knew helping the thugs was wrong, but she was simply too terrified to resist Hans's threats. She stands before Ronan, trembling and waiting for his judgment. Instead of scolding her, Ronan turns away with an indifferent shrug. He casually tells Estelle to meet him right back in this clearing in 4 days, specifically at night when the moon is high. Estelle is left utterly bewildered by his strange, sudden demand. To ensure she doesn't try to run away, Ronan slightly draws his sword, casting a dark, menacing shadow over his face. He coldly warns her of the consequences if she fails to show up. Estelle is left standing alone in a daze of sheer terror. On his way back to the village, Ronan's terrifying demeanor vanishes. He stops to pluck a beautiful bouquet of pink roses, remembering that his older sister, Iro, always loved flowers. As he approaches his home, a neighbor calls out to him from a balcony. Ronan briefly reflects on his grim past life as a blood-drenched disciplinary soldier, a stark contrast to this peaceful, flowery world. But his dark thoughts instantly melt away when his beautiful sister, Iro, greets him with a warm, radiant smile, wearing her familiar tailor's apron. Feeling slightly shy, Ronan awkwardly presents the pink roses to Iro. She is absolutely thrilled, squealing with delight and hugging the flowers to her chest. Ronan sits at the dining table, blushing and sweating in embarrassment at her overwhelming, joyful reaction. As they sit down for a warm meal, Iro happily fusses over him, offering him more stew. Ronan politely declines and suddenly asks how old she is this year. Surprised by the random question, Iro pouts and reminds him that she is 22. Hearing her age, Ronan silently calculates the timeline. There are exactly 10 years left before the terrifying, multi-winged demonic forces invade and destroy everything. Looking at Iro's caring face, he is filled with a fierce, protective drive to make this peaceful warmth last forever. Stealing his resolve, Ronan looks at his sister and calmly announces his intention to enroll in an academy. Iro's eyes widen in absolute shock before instantly lighting up with intense excitement. She is thrilled that her brother finally wants to pursue higher education. Without wasting a single second, Iro frantically runs to the back of the house, leaving Ronan sweating in confusion. Loud crashing noises echo through the home as she rummages through old containers, declaring that she always knew this glorious day would eventually come. Iro returns carrying a large pot and proudly presents it to him. Ronan looks inside and is stunned to find it filled to the brim with shining gold coins. Iro reveals she has been secretly saving for years to afford his tuition. Deeply touched, Ronan gently tells Iro that while he appreciates her efforts, this amount won't be enough. When a confused Iro asks what he means, Ronan reveals his true target, the most prestigious and expensive school in the Empire, Filion Academy, leaving her utterly speechless. Philion Academy stands as the ultimate beacon of strength and knowledge in the Empire. Known far and wide as a literal factory of heroes, it is a majestic, white-walled institution with towering blue spires designed to forge the absolute elite of the continent. Backed by massive funding from the imperial family and staffed by the continent's most outstanding professors, Philion offers an unmatched education. However, its legendary status is matched only by its incredibly high entrance standards and astronomical tuition fees that keep commoners away. In his past life, Ronan saw firsthand how useful Philion's graduates were during the catastrophic demonic invasion. Legendary figures like Grand Commander Adeshan and the genius Schlief and Grentia proved their worth on the bloodiest battlefields, making Ronan realize he must walk this path as well. Walking through the dark forest at night, Ronan carries a heavy pack, reflecting on his sister Irel's hesitant but loving support. She had been worried about his sudden ambition, but ultimately trusted him completely, giving him even more reason to succeed. Ronan meets Asel in the quiet clearing under the moonlight. Dropping his heavy gear onto the grass, he looks at her with a confident, sharp gaze. He tells the nervous girl that they have a busy night ahead and that he has a test for her. Asel is instantly flustered and terrified, wondering why he wants her to use her rare telekinesis so suddenly. Ronan calmly reassures her, promising she won't die from this, and urges her to simply trust him and focus her magical energy. Summoning her courage, Asel unleashes her signature spell, Invisible Hand. A massive surge of bright blue magical energy erupts from her hands, wrapping around Ronan's body and lifting him high off the cool night sky. Floating high above the forest canopy, Ronan looks down with absolute intrigue. Though the lift lacks perfect stability, the sensation of being suspended by pure telekinetic force is incredibly familiar, reminding him of powerful magical encounters from his past life. Ronan knows that telekinesis is an exceptionally rare gift among mages. He realizes that Asel's unique magic will be one of his most crucial assets in the ultimate battle against the giant demon Ahayut. Meanwhile, Asel struggles, sweating from the immense physical strain. Asel desperately begs Ronan to let her bring him down, but Ronan has other plans. He tells her to hold on just a bit longer, then calmly draws his sword, preparing to execute a daring maneuver that defies all magical logic. With a swift, precise strike, Ronan physically cuts through the flow of Asel's mana, instantly severing her telekinetic connection. He drops rapidly through the air and lands heavily on one knee, leaving Asel completely frozen in utter disbelief. Asel is shocked, having never seen anyone physically slice through magic. Ronan sheathes his sword, reflecting on this mysterious power. He knows this unique ability to cut mana is the very reason his blade could harm the giant demon Ahayute in the future. Ronan proudly declares that they are both heading to Philion Academy. Asel panics, sweating profusely and claiming she has absolutely no talent to survive among the Empire's elite, but Ronan refuses to let her back down from this journey. Ronan bluntly lists her flaws, calling her cowardly, timid, and a crybaby. While his harsh words hit her like a physical blow, he gently adds that it is fine because she has the power to change her weak nature starting right now. Ronan turns and begins walking away, telling her she is free to go back home if she wishes. Touched by his belief in her, a flustered Asel panics and chases after him, desperately waving her arms and shouting that she wants to change too. Hearing her commitment, Ronan turns back with a dark, mischievous grin. He tells her that her training begins immediately, and that he has already found the perfect opponent to force her latent magical skills to blossom under pressure. Ronan leads the terrified girl to the mouth of a dark cave. Inside, a sleeping horde of yellow-skinned lunar goblins rests alongside their formidable leader. With a confident, sinister smile, Ronan prepares to launch their very first raid. Peering through the dense foliage, Ronan and Asel set their eyes on their targets, the lunar goblins. These creatures are a distinct, yellow-skinned subspecies that plague the local forests. Unlike standard goblins, their disfigured bodies and pale coloration make them easy to spot if you know what to look for. While most travelers only recognize them by their grotesque appearance, Ronan knows their true secret. These monsters possess an insatiable, obsessive greed. They do not just hoard shiny objects, they go absolutely wild for gold, silver, and any sparkling treasures they can get their claws on. These greedy creatures regularly ambush traveling merchants, dragging all their stolen loot back to their camp. On nights with a bright full moon, they gather around their hoard to hold a bizarre, chaotic festival. Ronan grins, explaining that they are going to steal every single coin tonight. Acel watches the camp with deep skepticism, whispering that she has never heard of goblins holding treasure festivals. Ronan just smiles confidently. He cannot exactly tell her that he witnessed this behavior firsthand during his past life, back when he was wandering the continent as a battle-hardened soldier. Ronan lays out the plan, wrapping his arm around Acel's shoulder to keep her focused. He tells her she just needs to use her telekinesis to silently lift the treasure out of their chest and drop it into his massive bag while the monsters sleep. To him, it sounds incredibly simple. Acel instantly panics, imagining a giant, terrifying goblin catching them red-handed. She clutches Ronan's shirt, trembling as she begs him to reconsider this dangerous plan. Ronan sighs at her cowardice, but he holds up two fingers to explain why they absolutely must go through with this. Ronan explains that entering Philian Academy requires two things. First, they need to afford the school's astronomical tuition fees. Second, and far more importantly, they need real, life-or-death combat experience. He looks at her with a menacing, intense grin, emphasizing that true growth only comes from risking your life. Reluctantly, Acel begins her practical training. Sitting in the shadows, she focuses her mind and extends her glowing blue mana. Sweating and panting from the immense strain, she carefully levitates the heavy gold coins and delicate pearl necklaces, slowly transferring them from the goblin's chest into their own bag. Watching the treasure pile up, Ronan is highly satisfied. He cheerfully pats Acel's head as she collapses from exhaustion, praising her quick adaptation. Secretly, Ronan is amazed at how fast she is mastering her rare telekinetic gift, realizing he has found himself an incredibly valuable partner for his future battles. Their quiet success is suddenly shattered by a loud, aggressive shout echoing through the dark forest. Two armed men shouting curses chase after a wild creature and run straight toward the goblin camp. Ronan and Acel freeze in surprise, realizing their perfect stealth mission has just been completely compromised. The sudden noise wakes the entire goblin horde. The monsters rub their eyes, only to find their beloved overflowing treasure chest completely empty. A wave of pure shock and fury washes over the camp as the goblins realize they have been robbed, screeching in anger as they search for the thieves. The goblins quickly zero in on a rustling sound in the nearby bushes. Two alert monsters peer over the foliage, locking eyes with Ronan and Acel. Breaking into a cold sweat, Ronan curses under his breath, realizing that their peaceful escape is no longer an option. As the goblins shriek in alarm, Acel panics, grabbing Ronan's arm and begging him to throw away the heavy bag so they can run. Ronan flatly refuses. He asks her how they will ever pay for Philian without this gold, calmly drawing his sword as the horde closes in. A group of furious, red-eyed goblins charges out of the darkness, brandishing their weapons at the intruders. Acel screams in terror as the monsters leap forward to tear them apart. Ronan remains completely unbothered, telling her to stay back as he prepares to show her his true power. In a flash of blinding speed, Ronan unleashes a devastating horizontal sword slash. The sheer force of his strike cuts through the air, effortlessly decapitating three charging goblins in a single fluid motion. Their severed heads fly through the air, leaving Acel completely paralyzed with shock and awe. As a bloody goblin head rolls to a stop near Acel, Ronan stands calmly in the clearing. His blade drips with fresh blood, and a sinister, confident smile spreads across his face. He looks at the remaining monsters and begins a chilling countdown, announcing there are exactly 14 left. High above the quiet forest clearing, a black crow caws ominously against the cloudy sky. Its red eyes gleam with a dark intelligence, casting a shadow of impending doom over the blood-soaked battlefield below. With a swift, brutal motion, Ronan drives his sword vertically into the skull of the very last goblin. Fresh blood splatters across his face as he looks down coldly, wondering if the exhausting slaughter is finally over. Ronan wipes his blade, casually remarking that the fight wasn't half bad. Nearby, Acel sits frozen on the damp ground, staring at the dead monster in complete disbelief as she struggles to process what she just witnessed. Acel's mind races as she replays the terrifying spectacle. She remembers Ronan effortlessly decapitating 3 goblins in a single blinding flash of steel, facing down the entire rushing mob without a single hint of fear. He had moved like a ghost, leaving trails of red light as he tore through the charging horde. In an instant, he would vanish and reappear, leaving nothing but severed heads and splattering blood in his wake. Now, the quiet clearing stands completely still under the bright full moon. The ground is littered with the corpses of the defeated goblins, a testament to Ronan's terrifying and unmatched combat prowess that leaves Acel completely speechless. Ronan snaps Acel out of her daze, telling her it is time to head home. As he hoists his heavy pack, he feels a sudden wave of muscle fatigue, realizing his current body is still far too weak. Annoyed by his sore muscles, Ronan resolves to train even harder once they return. As they walk through the dark forest, Acel nervously asks about the strange, horrific shriek they had heard during the chaotic battle. Suddenly, a red-tipped arrow whistles through the dark trees, thudding into the ground right beside them. Ronan reacts instantly, grabbing Acel's arm to pull her back before she can step into the line of fire. Ronan mutters a curse, wondering if this forest is plagued by madmen. Out of the shadows step 2 hostile men wearing bright red uniforms, looking down at the young travelers with malicious intent and demanding answers. Ronan's eyes glow with a menacing yellow light as a dark red aura surrounds him. Before he can speak, one of the attackers leaps down from above, swinging a deadly dagger straight at his throat. Ronan catches the man's wrist mid-air, delivering a brutal counterstrike that forces the attacker to spit blood. He looks down coldly at the fallen foe, completely unfazed by the sudden violence of the encounter. Enraged by his partner's defeat, the second blonde-haired soldier charges forward with his weapon drawn. Acel overcomes her fear, extending her hand to cast her powerful telekinetic spell, Invisible Hand, to protect her companion. Glowing blue rings of magical energy bind the blonde soldier mid-stride. He struggles wildly against the invisible force, screaming in utter shock and confusion as he finds himself completely unable to move a muscle. Seizing the perfect opening, Ronan leaps from above with his dagger drawn. His blade flashes in the moonlight as he delivers a lethal low slash that cuts down the helpless, restrained attacker in an instant. Acel trembles as she looks at the fallen soldier, asking if he is truly dead. Ronan coldly confirms it, stating he would never spare the life of anyone who actively tried to kill them. Ronan explains that these men are part of the notorious Calaboro Syndicate, a ruthless group of poachers. If they hadn't fought back, they would have been buried secretly in this forest without anyone knowing. As they prepare to gather their things, Ronan spots a large, heavy sack left behind by the poachers. To their surprise, the bag begins to wiggle and move on the ground, catching their attention. Ronan carefully unties the sack, and a pair of glowing blue eyes peers out from the darkness. A mysterious creature looks up at them, hinting at a very unusual secret trapped inside the poacher's bag. As the heavy sack falls open, a vibrant blue bird emerges, spreading its wings and filling the dark forest with a soft, magical light. Ronan and Acel look up in complete bewilderment, having never seen such a strange, glowing creature before. The bird flaps its wings, chirping energetically despite the small metal cuffs binding its legs. While Acel gazes at the beautiful creature with wide, sparkling eyes, Ronan remains deeply skeptical, analyzing the situation with his typical caution. Suddenly, a bright yellow magic circle manifests above the bird's head, glowing with intense energy. A voice suddenly echoes from the light, startling Acel, who clings to Ronan's arm in absolute shock. Ronan quickly explains that it is merely communication magic. Ronan deduces that the poacher's bag must have been specially designed to block mana, which is why the magic only activated once the bird was freed. The voice introduces himself as Varen, a researcher of fantastical beasts and the guardian of this bird, Marpez. When Varen asks what happened, Ronan deadpans, deciding to skip the bloody details of his brutal fight with the poachers. He simply states that they rescued the bird, leaving the researcher utterly shocked to hear that his beloved Marpez had been kidnapped. Acel coos at the adorable bird, but Ronan focuses on the practical problem of returning Marpez to safety. Varun explains that dream birds possess a powerful homing instinct, meaning they can easily find their way back once they are freed from their physical restraints. With a swift, precise strike of his sword, Ronan shatters the metal shackles on Marpez's legs without harming a single feather. The freed bird chirps happily, instantly warming up to Ronan and cuddling against him in a display of deep gratitude. Before flying away, Marpez shoves its tail feathers directly into Ronan's face. Varun explains that the bird wants Ronan to pluck a golden feather, which will act as a magical compass, pointing directly to Marpez whenever they need to find each other again. Ronan plucks the glowing feather, and Marpez immediately takes off into the night sky at an unbelievable speed. With their rescue mission complete, Ronan and Acel head back to Nimbaton to sell their newly acquired goblin loot. They visit the Carabel merchantry, where the owner, Duan Carabel, warmly welcomes them. Duan is delighted by the high quality of the goblin treasures they brought, offering them a fair price that stands in stark contrast to the greedy merchants Ronan dealt with before. After a friendly handshake to seal the deal, Ronan pulls out a mysterious glowing purple egg they found in the cave. While he does not want to sell it, he asks Duyan if he can appraise it, curious about its origin and value. Ronan explains that he tried to throw the egg away in frustration when he first found it, only for the impact to shatter the surrounding rocks while leaving the egg completely undamaged. Duan is fascinated, recognizing it as a rare byproduct of a fantastical creature. As Duan carefully examines the egg's unique color and texture, Ronan suddenly looks horrified, bluntly asking if the rare treasure is actually just hardened horse manure. Duan laughs it off, assuring him it is highly valuable, prompting Ronan to keep it safe for now. Duan then mentions that his daughter is also preparing to take the Filian Academy entrance exam and offers to introduce her. Just then, a beautiful, athletic blonde woman with sharp green eyes approaches them, wearing a white shirt and a brown corset. The young woman, Maria, immediately speaks with a rough, aggressive tone, calling Ronan and Acel little babies. Duan quickly scolds his daughter for her language and apologizes to his guests, explaining that growing up in the merchantry made her quite blunt. Ronan stares at her in shock, recognizing her immediately. In his past life, Mariah was a reliable supply officer who always disguised herself as a man. To confirm his suspicions about her true identity, Ronan steps forward and confronts her directly. Leaning in close to the defensive young woman, Ronan whispers an incredibly crude question directly into her ear, asking if she possesses male anatomy. Maria's green eyes widen in absolute shock and outrage at his sudden, highly inappropriate provocation. Maria stands frozen in absolute disbelief, her mind struggling to process the incredibly crude question Ronan just whispered. Ronan leans in even closer, examining her with a highly skeptical squint, muttering that no matter how he looks at her, she definitely doesn't seem to have male anatomy. Enraged, Maria delivers a thunderous slap across Ronan's cheek. The impact sends his head spinning, but as he rubs his burning face, a spark of recognition flashes in his eyes. That heavy, perfectly executed slap and the stinging sensation are instantly familiar. It is her, Count Maria Sen. Ronan recalls his past life as a disciplinary soldier in Armelin, where Maria served as a highly reliable supply officer. She had been an impressive comrade, possessing a fantastic work ethic and an easygoing personality that allowed her to get along with absolutely anyone in the camp. However, she had one massive quirk. Whenever the male soldier started talking about crude, vulgar topics, Maria would fly into an absolute rage, slamming her fist down and slapping anyone nearby with her gloves. Ronan finally connects the dots as he realizes why she was always so sensitive. Looking at her now, Ronan cannot help but smile mischievously. The legendary rough and tough supply officer from his memories was actually a girl all along. He playfully teases her about the revelation, which only fuels Maria's outrage as she realizes he is laughing at her expense. Screaming in fury, Maria lunges forward to punch him, but Ronan quickly counters by chopping her on the head. She cries out in pain, and the two immediately devolve into a chaotic, comedic brawl, rolling on the ground and shouting insults at each other like wild animals. Acel watches the ridiculous spectacle with a sweat drop, completely bewildered by how quickly these two started fighting like they wanted to kill each other. Eventually, the dust settles, and a grumbling Maria rubs her bruised head, trying to regain her composure after the chaotic scuffle. The group sits down around a wooden table inside the merchantry tent to discuss business. Maria presents several weapons, and Ronan carefully inspects a sturdy black iron sword. Maria explains that black iron is incredibly durable and highly sought after by renowned knights because it rarely breaks. After handing the sword to Ronan, Maria learns about Asel's rare telekinesis magic. She is highly impressed, excitedly telling Asel that she might even qualify for a scholarship. However, Maria warns them that while the theory exam is tough, the practical exam is the real hurdle. Maria explains that to pass the practical exam, martial artists must demonstrate personal mana fighting techniques. Ronan looks completely blank, muttering that a swordsman should only need good swordshipment. He asks what mana has to do with basic combat, leaving Maria utterly dumbfounded. Maria stares at Ronan in absolute shock, her mouth agape as blue lightning practically crackles behind her. She cannot believe someone aiming for the prestigious Philian Academy doesn't understand the basics of mana. Ronan defensively grumbles, claiming that mana and aura are basically the same thing anyway. Deciding that words are useless, Maria slams her hand down and orders Ronan to follow her outside. She grabs 2 short swords from the table, confidently promising to give him some special training. Ronan is highly skeptical, but Maria boasts that the lesson will be over in a flash. With a resigned sigh, Ronan follows Maria out of the tent and into a quiet forest clearing. The night air is cool as they face each other, swords in hand. Maria is determined to teach this arrogant boy a lesson, while Ronan remains relaxed, ready to see her skills. As they prepare, Ronan ponders the difference between aura and mana. While aura is technically a form of highly refined mana, achieving it requires a lifetime of blood-curdling effort. Most warriors train for over a decade just to touch the barest hint of that enlightened, innate power. Ronan smiles, his sharp, golden-orange eyes locking onto Maria. He decides to stop overthinking the theory and focus on the physical clash. Maria draws her blade with a swift, focused motion, telling him that it is time to learn using his body instead of his head. Without warning, Maria leaps high into the air, her green eyes glowing with fierce determination. She descends upon Ronan with incredible speed, unleashing a massive vertical blue energy slash that tears through the air, forcing Ronan to raise his blade in surprise as their weapons violently clash. The forest clearing erupts with the screech of metal as Maria's dual blades collide with Ronan's sword. Sparks fly from the impact, illuminating the intense focus in both of their eyes. Maria doesn't hold back, immediately pressing her physical advantage. Ronan quickly realizes this isn't a standard sparring match. He notes her impressive ability to exert such high levels of power at her age, especially while dual-wielding. Maria, meanwhile, struggles to read his movements, sensing an unfamiliar, refined combat style. Determined to end the fight quickly and force Ronan to abandon his reckless plans, Maria unleashes her full mana fighting style. Swirling trails of green and blue energy wrap around her blades as she leaps through the air to deliver a decisive blow. Ronan's golden orange eyes glow with intense focus as he stares through his crossed swords. He mocks her efforts, questioning if this is truly the limit of someone who relies so heavily on mana. Maria is shocked by his absolute composure in the face of her assault. With a sudden burst of speed, Ronan parries her strike and swings his sword downward with immense force. The sheer pressure of his counterattack leaves a brilliant blue trail in the air, forcing Maria to shift entirely to a defensive posture. Ronan's blade narrowly misses her, slicing through the air with a terrifying whoosh. Maria barely manages to dodge, sweating profusely as she realizes how close she came to disaster. She sighs in relief, glad she did not hesitate for even a fraction of a second. Ronan calmly sheaths his weapon, completely unfazed by the close encounter. He tells her she is far from normal, to which Maria defiantly points her sword back at him. She warns him not to think he has won just because of one close exchange. But before Maria can finish her threat, her sword suddenly shatters into pieces. Ronan's threefold strike had already destroyed the blade's structural integrity during their clash. Ronan walks away with a smirk, telling her to prepare to pay for the broken weapon. As Marya stands frozen in disbelief, a timid hand taps her shoulder. Acel steps forward with sparkling eyes, praising Marya's effort. Having witnessed Ronan's terrifying strength firsthand, Acel completely understands the shock and frustration Marya is currently feeling. Recognizing Ronan's undeniable talent, Marya decides to fully support them. She brings out a backpack stuffed with Filian Academy theory exam workbooks and detailed summaries she made herself. Ronan remains slightly suspicious, keeping his hand near his sword hilt. Marya reassures them that she has taken a liking to them and wants everyone to pass the exam. She offers her valuable study guides entirely for free. However, she playfully raises a fist, warning Ronan that she won't let it slide if he fails after receiving her help. In the weeks that follow, Ronan's daily life begins to shift. He spends his days hunting down wolf-like monsters to keep the village safe, and his nights hunched over a desk, desperately memorizing foreign etiquette and theory that feel completely useless to a former soldier. Eventually, the group travels to Valon, the majestic capital city of the empire, dominated by grand white stone castles and towers. As they approach the prestigious Filian Academy, Ronan tells a starstruck Acel to stop acting like a country bumpkin so they won't be late. Acel is startled by his sudden impatience, but Ronan remains focused on the trial ahead. He knows the competition will be fierce, and he must secure his place at the academy to begin changing the tragic future. Ronan recalls his future rival, the legendary Schlieffen Grancia. As a descendant of a prestigious swordsman family, Schlieffen is a widely celebrated genius, considered to be the strongest young warrior in the Empire, wielding a powerful Tempest aura that Ronan must eventually face. Acel curiously asks Ronan if he brought the special item they acquired. Ronan pulls out the glowing, light blue feather of the dream bird they rescued from the poachers. He remembers that the bird's owner, a legendary researcher, resides right here in the capital. Guided by the magical feather, they make their way toward a towering study. Inside, a small, fluffy blue bird named Marpez chirps happily on a book. A gentle hand reaches out to pet the bird, thanking it for cheering him on. This is Professor Varen Fanashier, a legendary lion-like beastman who teaches zoology at Filian Academy. Hoping to repay the hero who saved his beloved Marpez, Varen walks across his spacious study toward the window to let in some fresh air. Suddenly, the window bursts open. Ronan and Acel break directly into the high-floor study, startling the professor. Varen gasps in terror as Ronan peers in with a mischievous grin, immediately recognizing the bluebird and demanding to know if Varen is its owner. Varen Fanashier stands startled in his study as Ronan steps through the high-floor window. The lion-like professor clutches his beloved blue bird, Marpez, demanding to know how they managed to scale the towering building. Varen's defensive suspicion quickly turns to awe when he spots the glowing blue feather in Ronan's hand. He realizes these young applicants are the very heroes who rescued his precious companion from the poachers. Sitting down in the lavish study, Marya complains about Ronan's reckless entrance. She points out that Ronan forced Acel to use her telekinesis just to avoid taking the stairs, prompting Ronan to comically pinch her cheek to silence her. Varen is amazed to learn that these brave young rescuers are actually here to take the Filian Academy entrance exams. Ronan shifts the conversation, eager to ask the legendary zoology professor about a strange discovery. Ronan presents a mysterious glowing purple egg with cosmic patterns, explaining that Marpez laid it shortly after being rescued. Varen gasps in absolute shock, immediately recognizing it as an incredibly rare dreambird egg. Varen explains that dreambirds are unique creatures that absorb environmental mana to lay a single, highly reactive egg. The creature that hatches will completely transform to reflect the specific mana it absorbed, like a phoenix in lava. Because the egg's current mana signature is so bizarre, Varen cannot predict what will hatch. Ronan offers to leave the precious egg with the professor, but Varen warmly declines, insisting that Marpez chose Ronan as its hero. Accepting the responsibility, Ronan carefully tucks the egg away. As they prepare to leave for their exams, Varen eagerly stops them and presents a special rolled-up scroll, promising it will assist Ronan in successfully hatching the mysterious beast. With the scroll in hand, Ronan and Acel bid the professor farewell. Soon after, Ronan and Maria arrive at Galalian Castle's grand practical testing hall, where anxious applicants await their turn under the heavy, tense atmosphere. While waiting, Ronan notices Maria is dressed in an elegant, expensive uniform. She proudly explains she wants to make a great impression on the wealthy nobles who might become lucrative clients for her father's merchantry. Maria laments that Acel is testing at the separate magic hall, hoping their timid friend isn't crying from nerves. Suddenly, the official calls Ronan's number, and he confidently stands up, ready to face the prestigious panel. Ronan enters the grand hall and faces 5 intimidating Philian professors. At the center sits the legendary archmage and headmaster Krava Kratir, alongside the incredibly intense Grand Sword Saint Nabi Rose, whose sheer vigor demands respect. Ronan introduces himself with calm confidence. Headmaster Krava Kratir instructs him to demonstrate his techniques on a magically engineered training dummy, which is heavily armored and capable of rapid regeneration and aura defense. When Ronan mutters that the advanced dummy is nothing special, some of the snobbish judges mock his country town background. Unbothered, Ronan draws his blade slightly, his eyes flashing with a menacing, focused yellow glow. In a blur of motion, Ronan steps forward and unleashes a single, incredibly precise strike. He immediately sheaths his sword and bows politely, declaring his demonstration finished, leaving the judges utterly bewildered by the sudden display. While the lesser judges whisper in confusion about how to grade such a brief performance, Headmaster Krava Kratir stares in absolute, sweating shock. He has realized the terrifying truth of what Ronan's single strike actually accomplished. Before anyone can speak, Nabero slams her boot onto the judge's table and leaps down aggressively. She swings her sword at Ronan with terrifying speed, but Ronan reacts instantly, blocking her heavy strike with a thunderous clash. As the shockwave ripples through the hall, Ronan stares back at the Grand Sword Saint, startled by the sudden assault. Naba Rose glares intensely with her glowing green eyes, demanding to know who taught him his extraordinary swordsmanship. The sudden, heavy clash of blades echoes through the stone hall. Ronan stands firm, holding back the massive force of the strike. He looks up at the white-haired woman with a mixture of shock and annoyance, asking who she is and why she just attacked him. The woman is none other than Grand Sword Saint Nabi Rose, and her intense green eyes burn with curiosity. Ignoring his question, she demands to know where he learned his swordsmanship. She holds her blade dangerously close to his neck, completely captivated by the movements she just witnessed. Nabiros explains that in the split second he drew his weapon, it should have been impossible to execute such a precise counter. Yet, Ronan did not just strike once. He unleashed 3 distinct, lightning-fast cuts with absolute precision, completely defying normal physical limits. She points out his final, arrogant touch. Ronan had purposely slowed down his last cut, making it visible to the judges as if he were being considerate of their slower eyes. It was a silent, mocking display of overwhelming superiority that left her both irritated and deeply impressed. Headmaster Krava Kratir watches the exchange with a stern, thoughtful expression. Nabaros grips her sword hilt tightly, her aura flaring as she declares that she will personally teach this arrogant boy. The headmaster chuckles, realizing the legendary sword saint has already claimed Ronan as her personal disciple. Standing before the high tribunal, Ronan realizes he must take his training seriously to avoid any future regrets. He remembers the grim, rainy battlefields of his past life. This time, he is determined to learn everything he can from the powerful masters gathered at Philian Academy. Meanwhile, the other judges are left utterly bewildered. One of the blonde-bearded examiners asks if Ronan used some kind of trick. Headmaster Crater weirdly smiles, pointing toward the testing area. The truth of Ronan's single strike is about to leave them speechless. With a loud thud, the heavy, severed head of the magically engineered training dummy rolls across the stone floor. The judges gasp in absolute shock. Ronan's single, casual strike had completely decapitated a construct built to withstand high-level magic and physical force. As Ronan walks away from the testing hall, he reflects on Nabaros's terrifying power. He remembers her legendary green serpent aura from his past life and wonders if even his former, experienced self could guarantee a victory against her. He smirks, excited by the challenge. Confident that he made the right choice coming to Philion, Ronan prepares for the upcoming written exam. He has spent the last month memorizing the study materials Maria gave him. Feeling completely relaxed, he assumes the theory portion of the test will be an absolute breeze. That confidence evaporates instantly. After the exams conclude, Ronan sits slumped on the ground, radiating a dark, gloomy aura of pure despair. He groans that his life is completely ruined, having failed to answer even half of the questions on the written test. Maria and Acel look at him with deep concern. Maria explains that in his hyper-focused state before the exam, Ronan completely forgot to bring his study bag, leaving all his notes behind. A tearful Acel blames herself, wishing she had reminded him to check his belongings. Mariah tries to reassure the depressed swordsman, pointing out that the practical test carries far more weight anyway. Soon, the official results are projected onto a massive, glowing blue magic tablet in front of a crowd of anxious applicants, revealing everyone's final standings. Acel is shocked to discover she ranked first in the theory exam and 12th in the practical for the magic department. Maria also passed comfortably, ranking 9th in both categories. Maria excitedly hugs the timid red-haired girl, celebrating her incredible academic achievement. When Maria turns to ask Ronan about his results, his face is heavily shadowed with a grim, hollow expression. He mutters that his name isn't even on the list. The girls gasp in absolute disbelief, refusing to accept that someone of his caliber could have failed. Mariah frantically grabs Ronan's face, pulling his eyelids open and demanding he look closer. Before they can panic further, a massive, fiery phoenix erupts into the sky, exploding into a brilliant display of light. It is the traditional cannon fire celebrating the top-ranking salutatorians. As the flames clear, a massive magical announcement glows brightly above them. It names Ronan as the Martial Arts Department Salutatorian. Despite ranking a disastrous 5,712th in theory, his perfect, unprecedented score in the practical exam completely overrode his academic failure. Maria and Acel immediately tackle Ronan, hugging and shaking him in a mixture of relief and absolute hilarity. They cannot believe he secured the prestigious salutatorian title with such a ridiculous score. Ronan, however, sweat drops, sensing a sudden ominous presence approaching them. A handsome, blue-haired boy wearing an ornate noble uniform steps forward. Staring down at Ronan with a cold, piercing glare, he demands to know if Ronan is the one who took first place in the practical test. It is Schlieffen Grancia, and a tense confrontation is about to begin. The atmosphere in front of the Grand Academy building instantly freezes as Schlieffen Grancia blocks Ronan's path. The surrounding students gasp in absolute shock, whispering in hushed, awed voices. They recognize him immediately as the Empire's rising star, the brilliant heir of the legendary Grancia ducal family. Ronan immediately senses the absurdly powerful aura radiating from the noble. He realizes this is a highly troublesome situation he needs to avoid at all costs. Shrugging off the tension, Ronan tries to casually walk away, telling Schlieffen to stop picking fights and keep moving. Schlieffen has no intention of letting him leave. Refusing to accept that a commoner took first place in the practical exam, he draws his sword with a fierce declaration. In a flash of silver light, he launches a sudden, aggressive strike that Ronan barely manages to block. The crowd erupts into excited cheers as a full-blown duel breaks out. Schlieffen demands to see the skills that supposedly bested him, his blue eyes glowing with intense determination. Ronan, gritting his teeth, calls him a crazy bastard, but prepares to return the favor. Swords clash with violent intensity, kicking up massive clouds of dust and sending shockwaves across the courtyard. Schlieffen swings down with incredible power, but Ronan holds his ground, looking thoroughly annoyed. He asks the noble if he is finally happy now that they have traded blows. But Schlieffen is far from satisfied. He steps forward, demanding that Ronan stop holding back and show his true hidden power. Ronan yells in frustration, desperately trying to get the obsessive noble to relax, but Schlieffen's focus remains entirely locked on a true test of strength. Suddenly, Schlieffen's eyes flare with a brilliant blue light. He begins to channel his signature technique, the Tempest Sword. A massive, swirling vortex of wind and mana erupts around him. Ronan is blown backward by the sheer pressure, cursing his luck for running into this maniac. Realizing he cannot easily handle the full force of the Tempest sword without revealing too much, Ronan decides to make a run for it. As Schlieffen charges forward with his glowing blade, Ronan desperately scans his surroundings for a quick way to disrupt the duel. In a comically shameless move, Ronan sprints past the onlookers and grabs a shocked Acel, pulling her directly into Schlieffen's path as a human shield. Acel shrieks in terror, completely bewildered as to why she is suddenly being used as a barrier against a deadly sword strike. Schlieffen is absolutely furious, screaming at Ronan for being a coward who would dare use a lady as a shield. However, his strict noble code forces him to forcefully abort his attack. The sudden, violent cancellation of his high-level mana strike causes a massive, blinding backlash of energy. Gritting his teeth in pain from the magical backlash, Schlieffen stumbles. Seizing the perfect opportunity, Ronan yells for Maria and Acel to run. Before the noble can recover, the trio vanishes into the distance, leaving a completely bewildered and frustrated Schlieffen shouting after them. Academy security guards quickly rush to the scene, having heard reports of a violent disturbance. They find Schlieffen kneeling on the ground, leaning heavily on his sword. The guards panic, asking if he is all right and offering to hunt down the insolent commoners who dared attack him. Schlieffen calmly dismisses the guards, insisting he will handle the matter himself. But as he looks down at his weapon, his eyes widen in absolute shock. His sword, forged from the absolute highest grade mithril, has a visible crack near the hilt from his brief clash with Ronan. A fierce, intrigued smile spreads across Schlieffen's face. He realizes that despite Ronan's seemingly unrefined style and cheap weapon, the boy possessed enough raw physical power to damage a masterwork blade. With a newfound, obsessive respect, Schlieffen vows to remember Ronan's name. The next day, Ronan and Acel travel deep into a lush forest. Acel is incredibly anxious, worrying about retaliation from the powerful Grancia family. Ronan casually reassures her, explaining that Schlieffen is actually a good person who is simply obsessed with swordsmanship and respects a fair fight. Acel relaxes slightly, realizing Ronan's assessment of the noble's honor is likely correct. Suddenly, the dense foliage parts to reveal a breathtaking sight. They have finally reached the Fernando Spring, a legendary mana vein that Professor Varen told them about, glowing with vibrant, sparkling turquoise light. The spring's concentrated energy is so immense that ordinary rocks nearby slowly crystallize into high-grade mana stones. Ronan marvels at Professor Varen's generosity in sharing such a valuable location. Looking down at his reflection in the glowing water, he feels the sheer weight of the ambient magic. Acel is amazed, noting she has never felt this much concentrated mana in her life. She prepares the magical scroll given to them by the professor. As they pull out Marpez's purple egg, it immediately begins to absorb the surrounding magic power at an incredible swirling speed. While the egg eagerly drinks in the rich mana, Ronan reflects on how much Mario would have loved to see this place. But as they watch the magical process, the peaceful atmosphere is suddenly shattered. Ronan remembers Varen's warning that such high mana concentrations also attract dangerous beasts. A sudden chill runs down Ronan's spine as a thick, metallic smell of fresh blood wafts through the forest. Peering through the dense trees, they spot a horrifying scene. A pile of slaughtered monsters lies nearby, and towering, dark silhouetted figures with glowing red eyes loom menacingly in the shadows. As Ronan and Acel step deeper into the shadowed woods surrounding Fernando Spring, the thick, metallic scent of fresh blood grows heavy in the air. Acel clutches her chest in terror, but Ronan remains completely calm, realizing they aren't the first ones to arrive. A sudden gust of wind rustles the trees, carrying with it a silent, lethal threat. High above them in the dark canopy, a faint, glowing pink light begins to sparkle, pointing directly down at the unsuspecting pair. Perched on the high branches are masked archers wearing animal skulls, their bows fully drawn. Without warning, they release their glowing mana-infused arrows, sending a deadly bright red streak tearing through the night sky. A rain of glowing red arrows descends upon the forest path. Instead of fleeing, Ronan steps forward, his eyes flashing with a dangerous light as he swings his blade, unleashing a massive, destructive red energy slash that tears through the incoming volley. These attackers belong to the notorious Calaboro poachers. Nearby, one of their eccentric members had been boasting about their special explosive arrows, proud of their destructive capabilities and eager to show off his tools of the trade. The poacher's boasting only annoyed his captain, who sat by a campfire telling him to shut up. Despite the reprimand, the scout insisted that their elite members, known as the organization's bloodhounds, had used these weapons to successfully hunt countless beasts. He spoke of these bloodhounds as terrifying, blood-drenched monsters with glowing red eyes and lethal instincts. But as the poachers prepare to face their intruder, Ronan dives down from above, shattering their expectations with a colossal shockwave. Ronan's single, powerful slash completely neutralizes their mana-infused arrows, leaving the surviving poachers in utter shock. They realize this is no ordinary target, struggling to comprehend how a lone youth could possess such terrifying strength. The panicked poachers quickly disperse, attempting to surround Ronan from all sides. Ronan notes their fast decision-making, realizing these fighters are far more experienced than the low-level thugs he dealt with back in Nimbutan's forests. To throw them off balance, Ronan stomps his foot and commands them to halt, claiming they are attacking an ally. When a confused, purple-haired poacher questions him, Ronan confidently drops a name from his past memories, Ahayut. The purple-haired man is highly skeptical that a mere teenager could be one of their elite bloodhounds. Ronan just smiles smugly, advising the man that assuming others cannot do what he himself fails to achieve is utterly pathetic. Enraged by the insult, the purple-haired poacher grabs Ronan by the collar, threatening to tear him limb from limb. Ronan remains completely unfazed, mocking the man's violent habits and warning him that people like him always meet a bad end. Another poacher wearing a wolf mask steps in to restrain his furious comrade, suggesting they confirm Ronan's identity with their captain first. They worry that killing a genuine member of the Damas branch could spark a deadly internal conflict. A heavy rustling in the bushes signals the arrival of their leader, Captain Vayam of the Demo branch. He is a massive, scarred, bald man clad in fur, whose imposing presence immediately silences the bickering poachers. The purple-haired poacher welcomes the captain, while others whisper anxiously in the background. Standing quietly among them, Ronan's face is cast in shadow as a sinister, wide grin spreads across his lips, realizing the entire squad is now gathered. Them suspiciously questions why a member of the Damas branch is trespassing on Demir territory. Ronan plays along with an innocent smile, pretending to be clueless before preparing to unleash his lethal trap. Before Vom can react, Ronan unleashes a devastating red energy slash that instantly tears through the surrounding poachers. Ronan mockingly remarks that Ahayut was simply the perfect name to use when pretending to be a filthy poacher. With a swift, blinding upward stroke, Ronan cleanly decapitates Captain Vuam. The massive leader's severed head tumbles to the forest floor, leaving the sole survivor, the purple-haired poacher, frozen in absolute, paralyzing horror. Ronan calmly approaches the trembling survivor. To ensure absolute cooperation, Ronan ruthlessly severs the man's fingers, ignoring his agonizing screams as the pathetic poacher falls to his knees, weeping over his bleeding hand. With a terrifying grin, Ronan demands a map of their hideout. When the weeping man pleads that he has nothing to write with, Ronan coldly points to the man's severed, bleeding finger, telling him he has just provided the perfect pen. Sitting calmly on a rock, Ronan examines the crude map drawn in blood on a scrap of cloth. The trembling poacher clutches his hand, desperately begging Ronan to keep his promise and spare his life. But Ronan has no intention of leaving enemies alive. With a swift, silent flash of his blade, he cuts down the screaming survivor. Standing alone in the dark forest, covered in fresh blood, Ronan looks down coldly at the slaughter. Acel leans against a nearby tree, gasping for breath as she struggles to process the sheer brutality of Ronan's swift execution. Ronan looks back at her, telling her to stop overreacting, but the timid girl apologizes while admitting that this level of violence is simply too much for her to handle. They both look down at the grim pile of slaughtered forest creatures left behind by the poachers. Ronan mutters that this is clearly Caliboro's doing, realizing how deeply saddened Professor Varen will be when he hears about the senseless slaughter of these majestic beasts. Suddenly, a strange vibration interrupts Ronan's thoughts. He looks down in surprise as the pouch on his belt begins to shake violently. Estelle turns back to look at him, completely bewildered, as Ronan reaches inside and pulls out the glowing purple egg they rescued. Before they can comprehend what is happening, the pile of dead beasts begins to bubble with a dark, ominous energy. A massive geyser of dark red blood and raw mana erupts violently into the air, causing Estelle to scream in absolute terror as Ronan shields her from the sudden surge. The purple egg in Ronan's hand suddenly reacts, emitting a blinding light that pierces the dark forest. A colossal pillar of purple and white energy shoots straight up into the sky, suspending the egg in midair as swirling currents of dark red energy begin to gather around it. The egg acts like a vortex, violently absorbing the floating blood droplets from the slaughtered creatures. Estelle clings to Ronan's arm in sheer panic, desperately asking what is happening, but Ronan can only tell her to stay back as he watches the bizarre phenomenon unfold. Sweat drips down Ronan's face, but a confident smirk spreads across his lips. He realizes that whatever is inside this egg is far from an ordinary creature. The swirling red energy begins to settle, and a sharp, sizzling sound echoes through the quiet clearing. The massive magical vortex finally dissipates, leaving the forest quiet once more. Estelle asks if it is finally over, but before Ronan can answer, a sharp crack appears on the surface of the purple egg, revealing a beautiful, swirling galaxy pattern underneath. The egg cracks completely open, releasing a sudden burst of blinding light that catches Ronan off guard. He groans in pain, covering his eyes, while Estelle watches in astonishment as a small, dark blue-winged creature with glowing red eyes floats gently into the air. The tiny creature cries out energetically, floating between the two stunned teenagers. Ronan stares at it, wondering what kind of immense mana this beast must have absorbed to hatch into something resembling a miniature dragon, though he cannot deny how incredibly cute it looks. The creature suddenly unleashes a bright blue magical aura that envelops Ronan. To his absolute amazement, Ronan realizes his minor combat injuries have completely vanished. The affectionate little beast rubs its cheek against his face, revealing its incredible capacity for high-level healing magic. The winged creature suddenly perks up, sensing a hostile presence nearby. With a bright flash of light, it flies upward and disappears into the dense foliage, leaving Ronan and Estelle startled but determined to follow the little beast's sharp instincts. Deep in the forest, a terrified Calaboro errand boy named Balrus runs frantically through the trees. He stumbles into the clearing and gasps in horror, finding the rest of his squad slaughtered and wondering what kind of monster could have done this. Suddenly, the small winged creature swoops down from the canopy, pursuing Balrus with relentless speed. The panicked errand boy trips over a rote and falls, screaming in agony as the creature's sharp claws slash his chest, drawing a spray of fresh blood. Ronan and Estelle catch up just in time. Ronan calls out to the creature, naming it Sita, and tells it to stop before it kills the boy. Balrus looks up in absolute dread, recognizing Ronan as the terrifying swordsman who wiped out his entire squad. Balrus immediately throws himself to the ground, bowing his head and desperately thanking Ronan for sparing his life. However, his relief is short-lived when Ronan steps forward and points his blade directly at the trembling boy's neck, knowing exactly who he is. Ronan smiles, revealing that he knows Balrus's name and his future reputation as a notorious bloodhound. The errand boy is paralyzed with fear, realizing this terrifying warrior somehow knows his deepest secrets before he has even made a name for himself. Holding his sword to the submissive boy's throat, Ronan explains that he has a very specific task for him. With a dark, sinister grin, Ronan makes it clear that this is not a request, forcing Balrus to cooperate if he wants to survive. Ronan and Maria strolled through the bustling streets of the capital, thoroughly pleased with their sudden financial success. They had managed to secure a massive sum of money, far exceeding their initial expectations, which put both of them in an incredibly cheerful mood as they walked side by side. This unexpected windfall was all thanks to the rare, highly concentrated potion Ronan had obtained. When Mariah's father, Duan Carabel, examined the valuable liquid, he was so astonished by its purity that he bought it on the spot for a hefty price, completely solving their immediate financial worries. Maria noted that they wouldn't have to worry about money anymore, prompting Ronan to express his gratitude toward Professor Varen. Although Ronan wanted to thank the professor in person and show him Sita, they discovered Varen was away on a business trip. Still, Ronan remained focused on his plans. Using the map he forced from the captured poacher, Ronan knew he had absolute control over the situation. He had ordered the terrified errand boy, whom he called Valis, to perform a specific task, ensuring the boy wouldn't dare betray him. Marya then asked what Ronan planned to do with his wealth. Since Ronan's perfect practical score exempted him from paying academy tuition, he had plenty of funds left over. As the entrance ceremony approached, Ronan decided to use his money to welcome his older sister Errol, who had just arrived in the capital by a luxurious carriage he hired for her. Errol stepped out of the carriage, her face lighting up with joy upon seeing her younger brother. She was instantly shocked by the expensive ride, frantically asking how he could afford such luxury, and immediately pinching his cheeks to make sure he was eating well and staying healthy. As they talked, the adorable dream beast Sita popped up from Ronan's shoulder, instantly capturing Errol's attention. Smiling warmly, Ronan gently took his sister's hand and urged her to follow him, wanting to treat her to something special before his busy academy life officially began. Ronan brought Errol to a high-end boutique in the capital. While Ronan sat comfortably on a plush sofa with Sita on his shoulder, the shop assistants helped Errol try on a breathtaking, sparkling cream-colored gown that made her look absolutely radiant, though she felt flustered by the price. Despite Errol's protests about the cost, Ronan purchased a massive stack of gift boxes. He looked at her with a serious, warm expression, explaining that it was finally his turn to repay her for all her years of hard work and sacrifice, moving Errol to tears of joy. Overwhelmed with pride, Errol loudly boasted about her kind little brother to everyone in the shop, deeply embarrassing Ronan. Eager to escape the attention, Ronan quickly ushered her outside, suggesting they visit the nearby workshop street so he could inspect some weapons. Their walk was abruptly interrupted when Schlieffen Grancia suddenly confronted Ronan. The noble youth was still furious about their previous duel, claiming that his high-grade sword had suffered a defect because of Ronan, and demanded to know what kind of lunatic would cause such damage. Ronan angrily drew his blade in response, refusing to back down from the challenge. As the two rivals prepared to clash right there in the street, Errol suddenly stepped between them, gently but firmly scolding Ronan for using such vulgar language and instantly halting the brewing fight. Errol turned to Schlieffen with a warm, apologetic smile, hoping to smooth over her brother's rough behavior. The moment Schlieffen laid eyes on her beautiful, sparkling face, he was completely spellbound, frozen in place, as if he had just witnessed a literal goddess descend from the heavens. Instantly shedding his cold, arrogant demeanor, a deeply blushing Schlieffen bowed politely to Errol. He insisted that the fault lay entirely with his own lack of virtue, desperately trying to reassure her, while Ronan watched the absurd transformation in complete, utter disbelief. Eager to compensate for the damaged weapon, Schlieffen pulled out an ornate golden medallion and presented it to Errol. Ronan let out a shocked scream, recognizing the object as the highly prestigious Grancia family identity plaque, which carried an astronomical amount of political and financial weight. Schlieffen explained that the plaque would grant them entry anywhere in the empire. He then recommended they visit a legendary blacksmith workshop located at the western end of the workshop street before turning around and walking away with a stiff, highly embarrassed posture. Ronan stared at the golden plaque in Errol's hands, completely dumbfounded by his rival's reckless generosity. He knew that a Grancia family identity plaque was valuable enough to purchase an entire decent-sized village, making him wonder if this was truly the legendary sword saint he once knew. Soon after, the highly anticipated entrance ceremony of Philion Academy commenced. The massive courtyard was filled with rows of exceptionally talented freshmen from the 787th term, all gathered to hear the welcoming address from the Academy's distinguished leadership. The elderly headmaster, Krava Kratir, delivered an inspiring speech about the students' infinite potential and the glorious history they would write. While Ronan found the grandiose speech rather boring, he smiled upon seeing his sister in the stands, deeply enjoying the prestigious occasion. Without warning, the headmaster snapped his fingers, unleashing a massive surge of blue magical energy. The freshmen gasped in absolute panic as the sky above them began to crack and shatter like glass, revealing a brilliant, swirling vortex of high-level spatial magic. In an instant, the entire student body was pulled through the shattering portal and teleported directly into the center of a colossal stone arena. As they tumbled onto the ground, a group of confident upperclassmen stood waiting, eagerly welcoming their new juniors. While Estelle looked around in sheer panic, Ronan remained completely calm, his sharp eyes scanning the arena. The headmaster's voice echoed across the stadium, officially announcing the start of the traditional face-to-face combat meeting between the Academy's seniors and juniors. The grand combat arena of Philion Academy buzzed with anticipation. The traditional face-to-face meeting between the freshmen and sophomores was about to begin, designed as a series of one-on-one sparring matches to test the newcomers' resolve. An elderly instructor stepped up to the podium to explain the deep significance of this event. He emphasized that these duels were not just a show of power, but the very foundation of mutual growth and true education at the Academy. While Errol watched anxiously from the stands, Ronan whispered cynically to his classmate. He saw right through the polite framing, recognizing the event as nothing more than a glorified hazing ritual meant to put the cocky freshmen in their place. The crowd's attention shifted to the 4 top-ranked sophomores standing in a row. Nico, Behum, Arena, and Aaron represented the absolute pinnacle of the second-year class, each possessing highly specialized and lethal fighting styles. Instead of feeling intimidated, Ronan clenched his fist with an eager, wild grin. He was practically vibrating with excitement, desperate to test his skills against these elite upperclassmen, while Errol watched him with a mixture of pride and worry. As the announcer officially opened the floor for the freshmen to freely select their opponents, Ronan's expression turned remarkably calm. A calculating look settled in his eyes as he prepared to make his move. Stepping forward into the open space of the arena, Ronan raised his hand high. His polite tone completely contrasted with the sheer audacity of what he was about to propose, catching the elderly instructor completely off guard. With a confident smile and a casual thumbs up, Ronan delivered his shocking proposal. Rather than choosing a single opponent, he boldly requested to be taught by all 4 of the top-ranked sophomores at the exact same time. A stunned, heavy silence instantly blanketed the entire Coliseum. The crowd stared in utter disbelief, and the flustered instructor quickly turned to consult with the formidable Grand Sword Saint Nabi Rose, unsure of how to handle such madness. Nabrose didn't hesitate for a second. With a decisive nod, she approved the match, reminding everyone that Philion's core principle was absolute freedom for those who possess the actual strength to back up their words. The 4 top sophomores looked down at Ronan with burning, hostile glares. They felt deeply insulted that a mere freshman, even the practical exam's top scorer, would look down on their hard-earned skills so blatantly. While the seniors drew their weapons and prepared to unleash their full power, the atmosphere in the arena grew suffocatingly tense. Up in the stands, Errol stood up anxiously, screaming at Ronan to forfeit the moment things got dangerous. Ronan simply turned back and offered his sister a reassuring wave, completely unfazed by the impending danger. The 4 seniors took their positions, their eyes locked onto their target as the signal to begin finally echoed. The match commenced with a sudden, explosive burst of movement. A blonde senior leaped forward, his blade shrouded in a violent purple aura, clashing directly against Ronan's sword in a shower of sparks. Ronan immediately realized these opponents were on an entirely different level than anyone he had fought recently. A dual-wielding senior lunged in with blinding speed, forcing Ronan to stay completely alert as he analyzed their highly refined movements. The seniors' teamwork was flawless. As one attacked, another swung a glowing blue energy blade, forcing Ronan to slide backward across the arena floor, kicking up a thick cloud of dust as he desperately defended. Seizing a split-second opening, a massive muscular senior materialized directly behind Ronan. Ronan's golden eye flared as he sensed the threat, narrowly dodging the devastating downward strike. The arena erupted into a chaotic flurry of high-speed clashes. Ronan moved like a blur, leaving faint red trails behind him as he parried a relentless onslaught of coordinated strikes, the sheer pressure of their combined force pushing him to his absolute limits. Despite the overwhelming pressure, Ronan felt a thrill he hadn't experienced in years. Dropping into a low, aggressive stance, his eyes began to glow a menacing red as the seniors prepared their final, coordinated strike to finish him off. As the seniors coordinate their final strike, Ronan moves with blinding speed. In a single fluid motion, he shatters their weapons, sending broken metal shards clattering across the arena floor. The sudden, overwhelming counterattack leaves the crowd in absolute silence. The silence doesn't last long. The arena erupts into deafening cheers as the spectators realize what just happened. A freshman had just completely dismantled the Academy's top sophomores in a flash, defying all expectations and leaving his peers utterly stunned. The defeated seniors stand in disbelief, staring at their broken weapons. The blonde sophomore can only offer a resigned smile, sweating at how completely one-sided the clash was. Meanwhile, Ronan stands calmly in the center of the dust, entirely unfazed by his victory. Up in the spectator stands, Errol is practically bursting with excitement. She violently shakes the shoulder of the student next to her, proudly shouting that the victorious boy is her little brother, thrilled that this display will keep any future bullies far away. Ronan walks over to the bewildered seniors. Instead of gloating, he places a hand over his chest and bows politely. He humbly apologizes for his rudeness, claiming he only challenged them because of the pure excitement of being at Fillion Academy. The seniors stare at him, completely dumbfounded. They wonder if he ate something bad, unable to reconcile his terrifying combat prowess with this sudden, extreme politeness. Ronan continues his respectful act, asking for their guidance in future training sessions. The surrounding students are deeply moved by his humility. They praise him not just for his strength, but for his incredible manners. Suddenly, one of the seniors firmly grabs Ronan's wrist, refusing to let him be so humble after a fair victory. The muscular senior hoists Ronan's arm high into the air, declaring to the entire arena that this is exactly what a Fillion student should be. He smiles warmly, congratulating Ronan on an amazing performance that has earned the respect of the entire student body. Watching her brother's social grace, Errol dabs her eyes with a handkerchief, crying tears of joy at how much her little Ronan has grown. However, from the shadows of the arena, a mysterious dark-haired observer watches the scene, smiling with deep intrigue. That night, the Academy hosts a grand entrance banquet inside a massive, brilliantly lit castle hall. Ronan sits at a long table overflowing with exquisite dishes, feeling slightly overwhelmed by the sheer scale and luxury of the Empire's finest institution. Maria happily digs into a massive piece of meat, while Acel asks Ronan if he saw his sister off safely. Ronan explains that it took a while to reassure Errol, who bombarded him with endless sisterly advice and warnings not to skip meals or fight. To ensure her safety on the journey home, Ronan reveals he even left Sita, his mutated dream beast, to guard her. Confident that Errol is secure, Ronan finally relaxes and grabs a large piece of meat, ready to enjoy the feast. Before Ronan can take a bite, a hand violently grabs his wrist. Schlieffen Grantia looms over him with an intense, obsessive glare. He frantically demands to know where Errol lives, how far away it is, and if the route is secure from bandits. Schlieffen continues his rapid-fire interrogation, asking if Ronan deployed a mercenary army to escort her. An exasperated Ronan snaps back, shouting that he did hire guards, who are far stronger than Schlieffen, telling the overprotective noble to stop worrying. When Ronan mentions that nothing short of a wyvern attack could harm her, Schlieffen panics even more, shaking Ronan by the collar. Ronan angrily asks if Schlieffen thinks he is Errol's husband, leaving the proud noble completely flustered and speechless. As Schlieffen stammers about a knight's duty, a purple-haired girl steps forward with a mocking smile. It is Elizabeth Akalucia, the top freshman of the magic class. She finds the scene highly amusing, noting she has never seen the fierce Grancius Wolf so talkative. Elizabeth coldly tells Schlieffen that her business is with Ronan, not him. While Schlieffen looks downcast and annoyed, Ronan points to himself in utter confusion. Uninterested in Schlieffen's complaints, Elizabeth dismisses him entirely and walks away, leaving Ronan irritated. Ronan tells Schlieffen to screw off, but before they can argue further, Elizabeth approaches Ronan directly. Her eyes glow with intense magical energy as she raises her staff, unleashing a massive burst of purple magic that forces the surrounding students to back away. As the magical pressure settles, Ronan stands protectively in front of a worried Estelle, completely unfazed. Elizabeth smiles smugly, stating that those who show talent must be taught their place, but then admits she is actually here to make Ronan a special offer. Ronan crosses his arms, indifferently asking what she wants. Elizabeth explains that she was highly impressed by his raw talent. Reaching into her uniform, she pulls out a glowing purple crest representing the prestigious Akalusia family, one of the Empire's greatest pillars. Elizabeth holds out the glowing crest, offering Ronan an adoption invitation that most commoners could only dream of. Ronan stares at the magical token in shock, realizing the massive political implications of aligning with one of the Empire's most powerful noble houses. Ronan stares down at the glowing purple crest resting in his palm. The Akalusia family is one of the two great pillars of the Empire, famous for scouting and adopting rare talents. Holding this medallion means an invitation to join their ranks, a dream most commoners would die for. He asks Elizabeth if she is truly allowed to hand these out so freely. She notes that his reaction proves he already knows exactly what the crest represents. Ronan sits back, deeply contemplative, wondering if a peasant like him could really join such a prestigious family. This token triggers a vivid memory of his past life. He remembers sitting by a campfire with Grand Commander Adeshan, who had also received an Akalusha invitation. She had encouraged him, promising that once he made up for his past sins through military achievements, he too would receive such an honor. Back in the present, Elizabeth tells Ronan she expects him to make a wise choice. With a confident smile, she assures him he will eventually become just like them. Ronan grips the glowing purple medallion tightly, realizing the massive political weight now resting in his hands. As the school year begins, Ronan quickly learns that life at Filian Academy is dictated entirely by grades. The most brutal demonstration of this hierarchy is the dormitory system. While top-performing students enjoy clean, modern rooms and high-grade cafeterias, those at the bottom face a very different reality. On the first day at Kratir Hall, a crowd of noble students stands in absolute outrage. Before them is a shabby, run-down wooden cabin. They complain loudly, demanding servants and private quarters, only to be told they must share 4 to a room with no staff. The staff member simply shrugs, telling the devastated young masters to study harder if they want a better room next semester. Meanwhile, Ronan walks toward his assignment, which is a massive, luxurious white marble palace reserved for the Academy's top-ranking elite. Stepping inside, Ronan is thoroughly impressed by the lavishly decorated room, complete with a personal desk and fresh flowers. He sits on the couch to plan his schedule. Although advised to take it easy during his first year, Ronan confidently decides to register for every class he wants. His first class is basic swordsmanship, taught by instructor Abar. However, the moment Ronan draws his blade and flawlessly executes the Empire's fundamental techniques, Abar is stunned. Realizing the boy's skills are already perfect, the instructor immediately exempts him from the class. The trend continues throughout the day. The bowmanship and monster hunting instructors are equally astounded by Ronan's mastery, giving him immediate passing grades and kicking him out of their classes. Ronan clutches his head in comical despair, realizing his planned school life is falling apart. While sitting outside in frustration, Ronan is startled by a voice behind him. It is the white-haired Grand Sword Saint, Nabaros. She stands with her arms crossed, smiling confidently as she notes that he has already completed all of his first-year classes on his very first day. Nabaros admits she expected nothing less from someone who can copy complex sword techniques after seeing them just once. However, as a Filian instructor, she refuses to let such raw talent go to waste. With a smirk, she decides it is time to give him a real lesson. Before Ronan can react, Nibiru suddenly takes his sword and drives it deep into the ground. She dismisses the blade as a mere chunk of metal, warning him that using such a poor weapon will only wear down his true power and limit his growth. To show him what a true warrior is capable of, Nibiru places her hand on the hilt of her own weapon. The atmosphere in the forest instantly shifts, growing heavy with anticipation. Ronan watches in silence as she slowly draws her blade, preparing to unleash her power. With a single fluid motion, Nibiros unleashes a colossal green energy slash. The sheer force of the strike tears through the forest and splits the nearby lake completely in half, sending a massive column of water rushing violently into the sky. Ronin stands frozen in absolute awe. As the green energy fades, the displaced lake water rains down upon them. Standing on the muddy bank, Nabarose points her blade directly at Ronin's chest. The display of absolute power leaves Ronin sweating, fully realizing the massive gap that still exists between them. Nibiru smiles confidently, telling Ronin that he is not allowed to attend her advanced class until he acquires a real weapon worthy of his talent. Left with no choice, Ronin realizes he must seek out a legendary craftsman capable of forging a masterpiece fit for his journey. Still damp from the colossal spray of the split lake, Ronin stood in the forest, deeply reflecting on Nabirose's overwhelming power. The sheer scale of her mana control made him realize how much he still had to learn. He stared at his hands, feeling the silent frustration of his restricted energy. Nibiros explained that a warrior's life on the battlefield is determined by how efficiently they manage their strength. Since Ronin did not yet know how to properly control his mana, wasting energy would only lead to a swift death. To truly unlock his potential, he needed a proper weapon. Naburo smirked, noticing the young swordsman's intense focus. She granted him special permission to attend her advanced classes, despite him being a first-year student. However, the condition remained absolute. Ronin had to find a sword worthy of his talent before he could step back onto her training grounds. On their very first day off, Ronin gathered Maria and Acel to set out on their search. He pulled out the heavy, golden wolf head emblem that Schlieffen Grangia had gifted to Errol. Schlieffen had mentioned a legendary forge that served his ducal family, and Ronin was determined to find it. Following the directions, the trio arrived at the western end of the workshop street. They stopped in front of a rustic, run-down building that looked ready to collapse. Maria and Acel stared in disbelief, highly skeptical that such a shabby place could house a legendary craftsman. Stepping inside, they found the interior even shabbier, covered in dust and shadows. Suddenly, a heavy thudding sound echoed through the quiet room. From a dark doorway, a massive clawed hand reached out, accompanied by a deep, rumbling voice complaining about the noise in the middle of the day. A towering, dark third wolf beastman stepped into the light, looming menacingly over the startled students. Acel squeaked in terror, while Maria instinctively tensed. Ronin, however, remained completely unfazed, looking up at the massive creature with a mixture of curiosity and intrigue. The beastman bared his sharp teeth, asking if the children were deaf and demanding they leave. Ronin calmly held up the golden Grantia emblem, explaining they had come to purchase a premium weapon. He confidently stated that he had been told the weapons forged here were of the highest quality. The beastman scoffed at the emblem, questioning if merely holding it made Ronin a member of the prestigious Grantia family. Without warning, the massive creature let out a ferocious, bloodthirsty roar, lunging forward to attack the group in a sudden burst of violent aggression. Ronin's combat instincts flared instantly. In a flash of movement, he drew his sword and clashed head-on with the charging beastmen. The impact of their weapons echoed through the dusty forge, sparks flying, as Ronin easily parried the massive creature's heavy, aggressive strikes. Ronin quickly gained the upper hand, pointing his blade directly at the beastman's throat. Terrified by the boy's overwhelming speed and lethal intent, the giant wolfman raised his hands in surrender. He desperately explained that the attack was merely a test to verify their skills. Ronin stared down with a deadpan, skeptical expression, unimpressed by the excuse. The beastman, sweating profusely, insisted that any forge used by the Grantia family required a strict verification process. He urged Ronin to confirm it with Schlieffen later if he still doubted his words. Accepting the explanation, Ronin sheathed his sword. The beastman, introducing himself as Didicon, laughed nervously and apologized for going overboard. He assured the terrified Acel that he didn't eat people, explaining that he served as both an apprentice and the gatekeeper of this forge. Didicon offered to guide them to the actual workshop, warning them to prepare themselves mentally. He walked over to a massive stone wall and pulled a heavy lever. With a loud grinding sound, massive gears began to turn, and the stone wall slowly slid open. A brilliant, intense light flooded the room, illuminating the faces of the amazed students. Didcon led them onto a large platform, explaining it was an elevator powered by magic stones and pulleys. It was the fastest way to descend into the true heart of the forge. As the elevator descended, a breathtaking sight unfolded before them. Deep beneath the surface lay Grand Cappadocia, a colossal underground city of fire and stone, glowing with vibrant blue magical energy. Ronan stood in absolute awe, completely speechless at the sheer scale of the hidden metropolis. Didcon grinned proudly at their reactions. He promised to take Ronan directly to the capital's greatest master craftsman. Deep within the glowing caverns, the rhythmic, powerful sound of a heavy hammer striking hot metal echoed, signaling that their meeting with the legendary blacksmith was about to begin. The group steps into the bustling underground forge city of Grand Cappadocia, where the air is thick with heat and clanging metal. Marya and Acel look around in absolute wonder, amazed that such a massive industrial metropolis exists directly beneath the capital. Didcon explains that this hidden forge operates in secret, supplying its elite creations exclusively to the royal family and high-ranking nobles. He guides them past rows of towering stone structures, leading them toward the workshop of a legendary craftsman. As they approach a large stone building, Didcon warns them that the master blacksmith is incredibly stubborn but possesses unrivaled skills. Without knocking, the beastman forcefully kicks the heavy door open, startling Ronan and throwing the workshop into sudden chaos. Inside, they find Elder Daron, a stout dwarf with a thick red beard, furiously hammering a glowing blade. Daron stops his work and glares at Didcon, highly irritated by the noisy entrance and demanding to know why the beastman is disrupting his focus. Didcon playfully shrugs off the dwarf's anger, pointing out that cluttered weapons block the doorway. Daron grumbles about the constant nagging, but quickly turns his attention to the young guests, asking if the boy Didcon brought is actually worth his time. Didcon boasts that he personally tested Ronan's reflexes and found his swordsmanship to be exceptional. Daron crosses his arms skeptically, looking Ronan up and down. To the dwarf, the young academy student looks like nothing more than an inexperienced child. To test Ronan's resolve, Daron suddenly snatches Ronan's cheap sword and snaps the blade in half with his bare hands. Ronan stands frozen in shock, holding only the useless hilt, while the grumpy dwarf dismisses the weapon as complete rubbish. Daron points to a massive pile of weapons scattered across the workshop floor, instructing Ronan to choose any sword from the heap. He explains that a trashy blade would only mask Ronan's true abilities, whereas any weapon here will be far superior. Ronan steps forward and selects a finely crafted test sword, immediately feeling its incredible balance and weight. Daron watches closely, commanding Ronan to swing the blade with everything he has, leaving no doubt about his actual level of skill. Taking a deep breath, Ronan centers his stance. He visualizes the overwhelming power of Grand Sword Saint Nabaros, channeling his focus into a single devastating strike. A vibrant red aura flares around his body as he prepares to unleash his full strength. With a sudden, explosive motion, Ronan executes a massive downward energy slash. The sheer force of the strike tears through the air, creating a blinding flash that splits the entire workshop cleanly down the middle, leaving a deep trench in the stone floor. Daron stands in absolute shock, staring at the ruined workshop. He immediately recognizes the distinct, terrifying style of the strike, realizing it belongs to Nabiros. The dwarf grabs Ronan's shoulder, urgently demanding to know if the boy is her apprentice. When Ronan confirms his connection to the instructor, Daron reveals a shocking truth. He is the legendary blacksmith who forged Nabiros' secret sword, Urusa. Hearing this, Ronan is amazed, realizing he is standing before the creator of that legendary weapon. Daron's skepticism completely vanishes, replaced by intense excitement. He admits he originally thought Ronan was just a boastful amateur, but witnessing such raw talent makes him feel truly alive. He eagerly promises to forge a weapon worthy of Ronan's immense power. The dwarf enthusiastically slaps Ronan on the back, nearly knocking the wind out of him. However, Daron points out that the test sword is already cracking under the pressure of Ronin's swing. Normal steel simply cannot withstand the sheer force of his strikes. Daron explains that they will need a highly resilient, rare material, perhaps a wyvern byproduct, to reinforce the blade. Hearing this, Ronin reaches into his coat and pulls out the extremely hard, mutated eggshell left behind by Sita's hatching. Daron takes the eggshell and attempts to crush it, striking it with his heavy mithril hammer. To his utter astonishment, the hammer bounces off, leaving the shell completely undamaged. The dwarf stares in disbelief, sweating from the sheer shock of its durability. Ecstatic at the prospect of working with such a legendary material, Daron eagerly agrees to forge a masterpiece sword named La Mancha. He tells Ronin to return in 2 weeks, promising that this weapon will easily handle his destructive power. Daron then turns to Maria in a cell, encouraging them to visit the other master craftsmen in Grand Cappadocia while they are here. The dwarf raises his hammer with burning determination, completely consumed by the desire to begin smelting Ronin's new blade. Meanwhile, deep within the dark, rocky caverns surrounding the forge, 2 mysterious hooded figures watch from the shadows. They whisper about their sinister plans, plotting to unleash a devastating attack on the unsuspecting blacksmiths of Grand Cappadocia. The hooded cultists gaze up at a colossal stone golem towering in the darkness, ready to bring ruin to the underground city. As Ronin prepares to return to Philian Academy, a silent, catastrophic threat begins to stir beneath the earth. While dark forces gather in the shadows of the underground forge, Ronin returns to the peaceful grounds of Philian Academy, unaware that his greatest test of restraint is about to begin. Walking through the manicured courtyard, he enjoys a rare moment of quiet reflection, letting his mind wander. He thinks back to Grand Cappadocia, where the Empire's greatest blacksmith, Elder Daron, passionately promised to forge his masterpiece sword. Even Maria and Acel managed to secure commissions with other master craftsmen, ensuring they would all return to classes with top-tier gear. Ronin smiles deviously, remembering how they pooled their resources, knowing that free things are always the best. He wonders if Acel and Maria are currently busy in their own classes, navigating their new lives as elite students, while he wanders the grounds. His footsteps halt in front of a massive, cathedral-like training hall. Ronin realizes this is where the legendary Grand Sword Saint Nabi Rose conducts her advanced classes. He hesitates, remembering her strict instructions to only return once he had acquired a proper weapon. Ronin touches the temporary sword at his hip, planning to postpone his attendance. Suddenly, a terrifying, suffocating pink aura flares directly behind him. He turns his head in sheer panic, sweating profusely as Nabiros looms over him with a menacing glare. Before he can run, Nabiros roughly grabs Ronin by the ear, twisting it painfully. She demands to know what he has been doing and accuses him of skipping her class. Her glowing green eyes pierce right through him, leaving no room for excuses. Ronin waves his hands defensively, desperately trying to explain, but Nabiros refuses to listen. She grabs him by the collar and drags him kicking and screaming down the path, telling him he can make his excuses once they reach the training hall. Meanwhile, inside the academy corridors, a long-haired female teaching assistant carrying a stack of papers is suddenly bumped into by an arrogant student named Cardin. The papers scatter across the floor as Cardin rudely barks at her to get out of his way. Instead of standing up for herself, the assistant quickly apologizes, picking up the papers with a strained, resigned smile. Cardin and his friend walk away, mocking her slow pace. Despite the humiliation, she quietly gathers her composure and heads toward the bright training hall. Inside the grand hall, Nabiros formally introduces Ronin to the gathered martial arts students. As the newly crowned salutatorian, he bows politely, noticing a few friendly, familiar faces in the crowd who smile warmly at his arrival. The door suddenly bursts open, and a panting, brown-haired woman rushes into the room, apologizing for being late. Ronin freezes in absolute shock as he recognizes her voice. It is a voice he never expected to hear so soon in this timeline. Nabiros tells her to catch her breath, introducing her as the class teaching assistant. The woman smiles warmly at Ronin, introducing herself as Audition, a second-year student. Ronan stares at her, completely stunned by the gentle, youthful appearance of his future commander. In his memories, Dacian was the legendary Iron Lady, the first woman to rise to the rank of Grand Commander, a leader whose veins ran with iron instead of blood. Seeing her now, serving as a humble assistant, fills Ronan with a complex mix of emotions. Ronan watches in disbelief as the other students treat Dacian like a common servant. She is ordered around constantly, running to check postures and fetch towels for arrogant classmates. Ronan realizes that Nabiros is purposely turning a blind eye to this mistreatment. As Ronan stands in silent contemplation, Cardan approaches him with a smug smile. He notes that the famous freshman looks bored and proposes a duel to test Ronan's rumored skills. Ronan tries to politely brush him off, his mind preoccupied with Adashan. Cardan laughs off the refusal, realizing he forgot his own weapon. He turns and aggressively barks at Dacian, calling her a loser and demanding she bring his practice spear. Dacian flinches and quickly runs to fetch it, eager to avoid trouble. When Dacian returns with a long spear, Cardan flies into a rage, snatching it violently. He berates her for bringing the wrong weapon, completely ignoring that he only recently switched styles. Ronan's eyes glow with a dangerous, murderous red light. Cardan strikes Dacian with the heavy wooden shaft of the spear, knocking her to the ground. He repeatedly hits her, loudly mocking her lack of talent and claiming she only got into the class by begging the instructor. Dacian can only cower and apologize. Unable to watch his future commander be humiliated any longer, Ronan steps in. With blinding speed, he grabs the spear shaft mid-strike, completely halting Cardan's assault. The sudden intervention shocks both Cardan and the trembling Adashan on the floor. Cardan demands to know what Ronan is doing. Ronan's grip tightens on the wooden shaft, veins popping on his hand as he struggles to contain his absolute fury. He tells Cardan that they are going to have that duel right now. Ronan's eyes glow with a terrifying, cold yellow light as he stares down the arrogant senior. He clenches his fist, calling Cardan a pathetic loser to his face. The tension in the training hall shatters, setting the stage for a brutal conflict. Cardan smiles mockingly, looking down at Ronan with smug disbelief. He asks if Ronan is really picking a fight over a loser like Adashan, mockingly wondering if they are twins. Ronan's grip on his wooden staff tightens until his knuckles turn white. His eyes glow with the terrifying yellow light as a dark red aura flares around him, warning Cardan to back off. Before Cardan can react, Ronan strikes. The blunt wooden weapon hits Cardan's chest with explosive force, shocking the senior with how much raw power Ronan possesses without using any mana. The impact blows Cardan backward, sending him sliding across the stone floor. Ronan stands perfectly calm, holding his broken wooden weapon as the tip clatters to the ground. Cardan struggles to his feet, his face twisted in pure rage. Veins pop on his neck, and his eyes glow pink as he grips his spear, refusing to accept this humiliation. Cardan swings his spear downward with all his might, unleashing a massive wave of pink energy. Yet, Ronan stands completely unfazed as the destructive force explodes around him. In a flash, Ronan counters, shattering Cardan's momentum. The arrogant senior is thrown backward, losing his grip on his spear and crashing hard onto the cold tile floor. Ronan stands triumphantly over the defeated Cardan, who lies face down on the ground. He coldly warns him to be grateful they are at the academy, or he would be dead. The watching students stare in absolute shock, unable to believe a highly ranked third year was defeated so easily. But Ronan is far from finished, stepping forward to find his next target. Ronan points his wooden sword at the terrified student who had ordered Adashan to wash his dirty towel, demanding to know if he thinks the assistant instructor is his servant. As Ronan approaches aggressively, Dacian suddenly steps between them. She places a hand on his chest, desperately pleading with him to stop and insisting that she is perfectly fine. Ronan refuses to back down, his face shadowed with cold anger. He tells her he can tolerate many things, but he will never let anyone look down on her. Dacian looks at him, completely stunned and deeply moved by his fierce protectiveness. Still, Ronan gently asks her to move aside so he can finish teaching these idiots a lesson. Before Ronan can take another step, a commanding voice echoes through the hall, ordering him to stop. Swirling green wisps of magical energy begin to rise around his feet. Instructor Nabi Rose floats above him, enveloped in green energy. She calmly states she won't punish him for the duel, but warns him to drop his sword and walk away. Suddenly, a terrifying, massive green serpent with glowing yellow eyes manifests behind Nabiros. The overwhelming pressure of her grieving snake aura completely paralyzes Ronin's body, leaving him unable to move. Nabiros declares she cannot let the class deviate any further. Ronin, gritting his teeth, defiantly asks how she could stand by and watch Adeshin suffer without doing anything. Nabiros delivers her final warning, but Ronin's eyes flash with fury. He grips his wooden sword even tighter, refusing to back down even against the legendary Sword Saint. Ronin boldly tells her to get lost. Nabiros closes her eyes with a heavy sigh, realizing there is no helping it, and prepares to unleash her full power. The grieving snake strikes with a blinding flash of green energy. The sheer, crushing force overwhelms Ronin, causing his vision to blur as his consciousness fades away. Plunged into darkness, Ronin experiences a horrific nightmare of his past life. He sees Adeshan smiling sadly amidst a tragic battlefield, telling him not to forgive her. Ronin sits up abruptly in a clinic bed, screaming in panic. As he pants heavily, he finds Adeshan leaning over him, asking what he meant by Grand Commander. Ronin flinches under Adeshan's questioning gaze. He laughs awkwardly, trying to brush off his slip of the tongue. He quickly changes the subject, asking if they are currently in the Academy's clinic. Adeshan confirms they are in the clinic. She explains that instructor Nabiros ordered her to bring him here after he passed out. She also relays a stern warning from the intimidating instructor. Adeshan smiles warmly and asks Ronin if he was truly acting so reckless and angry just for her sake. Ronin gets flustered, sweating as he tries to claim he is just a polite gentleman. Adeshan laughs at his terrible lying. She gently asks him not to hold a grudge against Cardin or the other students, explaining that she actually understands why they look down on her. Ronin is completely baffled and frustrated by her submissive attitude. He demands to know what she did wrong other than working hard, and why she is even serving as an assistant. Ronin accuses Nabiros of turning a blind eye to the bullying. However, Adeshan shocks him by revealing that the instructor is only acting this way because Adeshan specifically requested it. Adeshan explains that the advanced class normally requires students to be sword experts. Despite taking a year off, she can still barely control her mana, making her feel like an imposter. Ronin is stunned. He remembers her future self as the legendary, powerful Grand Commander who commanded armies with a brilliant aura. It is hard to reconcile that with her current struggle. Adeshan explains she must endure this treatment as the price for being allowed in the class. Grabbing Ronin's hands, she reassures him with a determined smile that she can handle it. Ronin asks if she is going to such extreme lengths because she wants to become a general. Adeshan gasps in surprise, wondering how he could have possibly guessed her secret dream. She admits she is still lacking, but refuses to give up. As the academy bell rings, she bids Ronin farewell, telling him to rest up before his next class. Ronin politely thanks his senior as she leaves. Left alone in the quiet clinic room, he stares down at his bandaged hands, his mind drifting back to the dark future. He remembers her final, tragic words on the blood-soaked battlefield, telling him to make her do tailoring instead of wasting time. Ronin resolves to ensure she achieves her dream instead. 2 weeks pass. Ronin, Maria, and Asel return to the entrance of Grand Cappadocia to collect his newly forged sword, only to find the street completely deserted and silent. Ronin grumbles about the lack of customer service, especially after receiving an urgent carrier pigeon in the middle of the night. He kicks a piece of discarded armor in frustration. Deciding not to wait around, Ronin approaches the hidden entrance. Remembering his past life, he presses the correct brick on the wall, causing the secret passage to slide open. They step through the passage, but instead of a bustling forge, they are met with a massive explosion. The underground city of Grand Cappadocia is engulfed in thick smoke and fire. Ronin and Maria grip the balcony railing in absolute shock. Below them, Asel points in terror at massive rock giants with glowing red eyes, hunting down the fleeing blacksmiths. Ronin immediately shifts into combat mode. He orders Maria to run back up and find any masters or reinforcements, while he prepares to leap directly into the chaos below. Ronan grabs a startled Estelle under his arm and leaps off the high balcony. He commands her to cast her telekinesis magic to cushion their rapid descent. Down below, the terrified blacksmiths, cornered by a towering stone golem, prepare for the end. Suddenly, a flash of energy strikes the monster, drawing its attention. Ronan lands safely before the relieved blacksmiths. Glaring at the massive rock giant with a glowing yellow eye, he coldly declares that these monsters picked the absolute wrong day to attack. Ronan lands directly in front of the terrified blacksmiths, staring down a massive stone golem with glowing red eyes. He mockingly calls them stupid lumps of stone, completely unfazed by their size as the monster roars and charges forward. With Sita hovering near his shoulder, Ronan moves with blinding speed. He leaps directly into the path of the charging beast, delivering a series of rapid, precise strikes that slice clean through the golem's rocky exterior. A massive vertical slash of red and white energy splits the stone giant completely in half. Its giant head crashes to the ground, the red glow in its eyes fading into nothingness as the immediate threat is neutralized. The rescued blacksmiths stare in absolute disbelief. They recognize Ronan as Elder Daron's guest from the other day, completely shocked that a teenager could take down a legendary rock giant with a single, effortless blow. Standing atop the shattered golem, Ronan demands an explanation. The distressed blacksmiths explain that dozens of rock giants suddenly emerged from deep underground, destroying everything in sight and targeting the blacksmiths specifically. The giants captured several master craftsmen, including Elder Daroni, and dragged them back down into the depths. The wolf beastman Dedekind chased after them, but he was not built for direct combat against such overwhelming numbers. Ronan hands Sita to a startled Estelle, instructing her and Maria to administer first aid to the survivors. He resolves to dive deeper into the mines alone to rescue the captured blacksmiths and retrieve his newly forged weapon. Deeper in the cavern, Dedekind and Elder Daron are cornered by more stone monsters. Dedekind desperately yells at the stubborn dwarf to evacuate, but Daron refuses to leave his masterpiece behind. Daron proudly clutches a wrapped bundle, declaring it his absolute masterpiece. Dedekind is furious at the dwarf's obsession with weapons during a life-or-death crisis as the cavern walls begin to crack under immense pressure. A massive stone golem with glowing red eyes looms over them, raising its colossal fist. It smashes down violently, creating a terrifying shockwave that threatens to crush both the dwarf and the wolf beast man. Dedekind uses all his strength to hold back the giant stone fist, but the defensive enchantments on his armor shatter under the pressure. Exhausted and facing certain death, he laments his unfulfilled creations. Suddenly, a silhouette leaps through the air. A series of brilliant red energy slashes cut through the darkness, instantly slicing the giant stone monster apart and saving Dedekind just in the nick of time. Ronan walks forward confidently, telling Dedekind to take a breath. Dedekind and Daron are shocked to see him, wondering how he bypassed the horde of giants guarding the tunnels. Ronan casually explains that he slaughtered every single giant on his way down. Since his old sword is completely ruined, he demands that Daron hand over the newly forged weapon right now. Daron quickly hands over the wrapped, unfinished sword. Ronan firmly grips the hilt, his golden eyes glowing with anticipation as he draws the dark, incredibly sharp blade of La Mancha. Facing a fresh horde of stone golems, Ronan swings his new sword upward. He unleashes a colossal, blinding red energy slash that tears through the cavern, completely obliterating the remaining monsters in a single strike. Ronan is amazed by the sword's weightless feel. Daron excitedly explains that the weapon is named La Mancha, forged to be lighter than air, yet harder than mithril, capable of withstanding any swordsmanship. As the sword absorbs the blood of fallen enemies, it begins to glow with a mysterious golden energy. Ronan feels the weapon's power growing, realizing he has acquired an incredibly formidable tool. While Dedekind urges everyone to escape, Ronan tells them to go on ahead. His golden eyes narrow as he glares into the dark shadows of the cave, sensing that some very big rat bastards are still hiding nearby. What dark forces would dare to orchestrate an attack on the Empire's greatest forge? While Didicon urges a quick escape from the ruined cavern, Ronan stops in his tracks. He senses a sinister presence lingering nearby, warning his companions that the real culprits are still hiding in the shadows. Ronan approaches the massive severed head of a fallen rock giant to investigate. He knows their natural habits all too well. These massive creatures are usually solitary and peaceful, never flocking together or attacking unless someone actively provokes them. Something is highly unusual about this sudden rampage. Brushing aside the dust, Ronan discovers a glowing blue magic circle engraved directly onto the back of the giant's head. He calls out in surprise, realizing this is no natural phenomenon. The giants were clearly being controlled by some external force, prompting a deeper look. Elder Daron inspects the glowing pattern closely, his face growing grim. Though he is no master of spellcraft, he can feel the insidious mana reverberation left behind. He confirms that this dark magic is exactly what drove the peaceful giants into a violent frenzy. Determined to find the masterminds, Ronan decides to head deeper into the cavern. While the others wonder who could possibly commit such an atrocity, Ronan points out that the answers lie further ahead. He tracks the heavy footprints leading into the dark. Sliding down a steep, dusty slope, Ronan's suspicions are quickly confirmed. Alongside the massive, heavy tracks of the rock giants, he spots distinct, human-sized footprints. To make matters worse, a glowing purple mana-sensing stone is embedded in the wall to warn of intruders. Ronan bypasses the trap, moving with absolute stealth. Suddenly, he freezes as the faint sound of voices echoes from the corridor ahead. Crouching low against the rough stone wall, Ronan prepares to peek around the corner to see who is hiding there. Deep within the chamber stands a massive, golden, crystalline giant, radiating a powerful energy. Two figures clad in white hooded cloaks stand before it, discussing their dark plans. Ronan watches them closely from his hiding spot, realizing these are the masterminds. The male cultist, Idawan, expresses his frustration that their brainwashing on the giants is being broken. He wonders how the Empire's forces managed to react so quickly to their plot. Beside him, the female cultist, Cyrilla, remains calm and analytical. Idawan suggests simply slaughtering everyone in their path, but Cyrilla dismisses the idea. She points out that they have already achieved their main goal. With the major facilities destroyed, the Empire's weapon manufacturing technology has been severely set back. Cyrilla warns Eduan that if their identities are revealed, their mysterious leader will not tolerate the failure. Eduan shrugs off her warning, conjuring a small flame in his hand. He decides to have a little fun before they make their escape. Ronan detects the sharp smell of sulfur in the air, realizing he has been spotted. Before he can move, Eduan unleashes a massive, roaring wave of fire down the narrow corridor, aiming to incinerate the hidden intruder. The corridor erupts in a violent, fiery explosion. Ronan is forced to move instantly, leaping through the flames to avoid the brunt of the blast. He lands amidst the smoke, annoyed but completely unharmed, as Eduan mocks the unexpected guest. Ronan crouches low, his orange eyes glowing with intense focus through the rising embers. Eduan notes that Ronan is surprisingly nimble. Ronan analyzes his opponents, realizing they are highly skilled mages capable of rapid materialization magic. The cultists confidently step forward, completely unfazed by Ronan's presence. Cyrilla urges Eduan to stop wasting time, but Eduan insists on enjoying some entertainment. He believes they have plenty of time before their ultimate plans are set in motion. Eduan grins maniacally, declaring that everything in this world will soon be buried in starlight. This phrase immediately triggers Ronan's memories. It is the unmistakable creed of Nebula Clavier, the very cult that brought about the end of the world. Hearing those cursed words fills Ronan with absolute burning rage. His eyes flare with a terrifying intensity as he demands to know if they truly understand the weights of what they are saying. He calls them rat bastards, his aura shifting violently. The sudden shift in the atmosphere startles the cultists. Ronan draws his newly forged masterpiece, La Mancha, which begins to hum with a powerful energy. He coldly orders both of them to surrender and come with him quietly. Eduan mocks Ronan's threat, preparing to strike with a flaming fist. But before he can even register the movement, Ronan dashes forward at extreme speed. In a flash of steel, Ronan slices off Eduan's arm, sending blood spraying into the air. Eduan collapses to the ground in sheer shock and agony, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Ronan stands over him, looking down with cold, merciless eyes. He tells the mutilated cultist to simply lie down and stay quiet. Cirilla watches in absolute horror, unable to believe that Eduan was defeated without even being able to react. Before she can cast a spell, Ronan lunges forward, grabbing her tightly by the throat and lifting her off the ground. Holding Cirilla helpless in his grasp, Ronan warns her that she must answer his questions obediently unless she wants to share her partner's brutal fate. Cirilla glares up at him in terror, completely cornered by the terrifying young swordsman. Holding Cirilla tightly by the throat, Ronan looks down at her with a cold, unforgiving glare. He gestures toward the bleeding, armless Eduan, warning her that she will end up exactly like her partner if she refuses to cooperate. Cirilla struggles in his grip, her eyes wide with terror as she realizes the sheer danger she is in. Suddenly, Ronan senses a strange fluctuation in the air. Cirilla attempts to secretly gather her mana to cast a spell, but Ronan's sharp combat instincts immediately pick up on the golden energy swirling around them. He realizes she has no intention of giving in easily and prepares to shut down her resistance. With a cold sigh, Ronan decides to teach her a brutal lesson. His hand twitches as he channels his own energy, preparing a swift and merciless strike. Before Cirilla can unleash her magic, a bright red energy slash cuts through the dark cavern, completely overwhelming her defenses. Without a shred of hesitation, Ronan drives his sword straight into Cirilla, pinning her to the ground as blood sprays across the stone floor. Her screams of agony echo through the cavern. Ronan stands over her, completely unfazed by her suffering, using her pain as leverage to force her partner's surrender. Looking closely at her blood-stained face, Ronan notices her pointed ears and realizes she is a half-elf. He demands to know who they are and why they are targeting the Empire's weapon manufacturing. Cirilla can only grimace in pain and anger, refusing to answer his questions. Before Ronan can press further, a grotesque sound echoes from behind. He turns to see Eduan's severed shoulder writhing with dark, revolting energy. To Ronan's disbelief, the cultist uses forbidden dark magic to regenerate his lost arm, transforming it into a mutated, flaming limb resembling twisted tree roots. Eduan stands fully upright, his eyes glowing with a murderous red light as flames erupt from his mutated arm. He furiously commands Ronan to step away from Cirilla, his voice dripping with pure hatred. The cavern temperature rises as the dark magic flares around him. Despite the terrifying display, Ronan remains entirely unimpressed. He stands casually over the fallen half-elf, pointing his sword at her throat. He mockingly asks Eduan if they should test whether Cirilla's limbs can also regenerate if he decides to perform another amputation show right now. Faced with Ronan's ruthless threat, Eduan's anger turns to desperate resignation. He lowers his head and agrees to surrender quietly to save Cirilla's life. Ronan grins, pleased with the choice, but he fails to notice the maniacal smile suddenly spreading across Cirilla's bloody face. Before Ronan can secure them, Cirilla triggers a hidden spell. A blinding light erupts from her body as she initiates a massive explosion. Ronan realizes too late what she has done, his eyes widening in shock as the destructive force of the blast detonates directly in front of him. The violent explosion tears through the cavern, shattering stone and sending a massive shockwave of fire and debris outward. Ronan is thrown backward by the sheer force of the blast. Thick smoke and dust fill the air, completely obscuring the battlefield as the echoes of the detonation rumble. As the smoke begins to clear, Eduan helps the injured Cirilla to her feet. He explains that he barely managed to activate a giant's arm to shield them from the blast, but he is certain Ronan was severely injured. He urges Cirilla to flee to their church and report the situation. Eduan vows to stay behind and deal with Ronan himself, refusing to let him escape. Cirilla reluctantly agrees, warning him to be careful. She acknowledges that Ronan is a terrifying beast in the form of a child, and they cannot afford to let their guard down again. But before Edouin can even take a step, a sudden shadow lunges through the dust. Ronan, bloodied but relentless, ambushes him with a devastating slash. Blood sprays into the air as Ronan's blade cuts deep into Edouin's shoulder, completely shattering his resolve. Standing over the fallen cultist, Ronan turns his cold yellow eyes towards Cyrilla. He is heavily bruised and bleeding from the explosion, but his menacing aura remains fully intact. He growls that he still has far too many questions to let them escape so easily. Cyrilla backs away in absolute horror, sweating profusely as she wonders how this monster could possibly still be standing after taking such a blast. Ronan grips his sword tightly, his eyes glowing with a cold cyan light, determined to finish them off once and for all. However, as Ronan tries to take another step, his body suddenly betrays him. He collapses to one knee, driving his sword into the ground to support himself. His hands shake uncontrollably, and he curses in frustration as his severe injuries finally catch up to him. Seeing Ronan struggle, Cyrilla realizes she has a golden opportunity to escape. She decides that reporting this disaster to the church is her top priority. Clutching her own wounds, she turns and runs toward the light of the cavern exit, leaving the frustrated swordsman behind. Ronan desperately tries to force his body to move, reaching out a bloody hand toward her retreating figure. He shouts in anger, but his vision begins to blur. He is completely helpless, unable to pursue her as she nears the edge of the cavern cliff. Just as Cyrilla is about to escape into the night, a massive green aura suddenly erupts at the cavern entrance. A terrifying, smoky energy blocks her path, and she freezes in sheer shock. Ronan looks up, sensing a familiar and overwhelmingly powerful presence arriving on the scene. The green mist solidifies into a colossal, glowing-eyed serpent that towers over the terrified half-elf. Standing at the center of this terrifying, grieving snake aura is none other than Grand Sword Saint Nabarose, who has tracked Ronan all the way to this hidden cavern. Nabarose stands imposingly, her eyes glowing with a furious light as she looks down at the trembling cultists. With absolute authority, she demands to know who dared to mess with her disciple, leaving the cornered cultists with nowhere left to run. When the shadows of a dark conspiracy threaten the Empire, even a legendary sword saint must step into the light. Kneeling on the cold ground, a battered Ronan looks up to see a familiar pair of boots approaching. Despite his bleeding wounds, a relieved smile spreads across his face. Grand Sword Saint Nabarose stands tall over her exhausted disciple. She looks down with a calm, slightly sarcastic expression, noting that since he is still blabbering, he must still be alive. Her arrival is a miracle, but her focus quickly shifts to the remaining threat. Nabarose's eyes flash with a menacing, sharp green light as she prepares to deal with the intruders. Off-panel, her voice looms, asking if they should clean up the mess first. Cyrilla, the bloodied half-elf cultist, looks up in absolute terror as a giant, glowing reptilian eye appears behind her. Realizing who has arrived, Cyrilla panics, desperately trying to flee, but escape is impossible against the Grand Sword Saint. A hand crackling with green energy reaches out, violently grabbing the half-elf by the face and neck, instantly cutting off her desperate retreat. Nabirose's expression turns cold and furious as she holds the struggling cultist. With a sudden explosive burst of green energy, she unleashes her terrifying grieving snake aura. A massive wave of slashing force completely engulfs the scene, leaving no room for resistance. The overwhelming power of the Sword Saint leaves the cultist completely helpless. Cyrilla gasps for air as she is choked amidst the swirling green energy, her vision fading. Both intruders are thoroughly subdued, their plans to destroy the forge shattered in an instant. As the dust settles, Nabarose acknowledges Ronan's hard work, but instead of resting, Ronan looks up with a grim, determined expression. He asks her about the floating prison, Rodolin, a notorious fortress he remembers vividly from his future memories of the Empire's darkest interrogations. Nabarose is taken aback, wondering how a mere freshman could possibly know about such a highly classified, floating imperial prison. Desperate to uncover the cult's secrets before the future invasion, Ronan grabs his instructor's wrist, pleading to be allowed to accompany the prisoners to their interrogation. Looking down at her bruised and bleeding disciple, Nabiros is struck by the sheer intensity in his eyes. Ronan is clearly exhausted, yet his resolve is unshakable. She silently contemplates his desperate request, realizing there is far more to this young man than meets the eye. Meanwhile, back at the surface of Grand Cappadocia, the injured survivors receive medical treatment. Maria and Acel stand together, letting out sighs of relief now that the danger has passed. However, Acel grows anxious, wondering why Ronan has not yet returned from the depths of the cavern. Suddenly, a large boot steps into view, startling the girls. Ronan walks up, bloodied and scratched, but wearing a reassuring smile. Maria and Acel are horrified by his state, frantically telling him to get treated immediately. But Ronan casually brushes off their worries. Ronan looks back at the stretchers carrying the wounded, his expression turning solemn. Nearby, the two captured cultists, Edwan and Cyrilla, are tightly bound in ropes. Ronan's eyes burn with a quiet fury. He has critical business to attend to, and he cannot let these cultists slip away. Later that night, on a high cliff overlooking the Grengno forest, Ronan and Nabarro stand side by side under a starry sky. Imperial guards secure the perimeter as they wait in tense silence. Suddenly, a massive shadow sweeps across the sky, cutting through the night air. A giant, dark-feathered beast with glowing red eyes swoops down, kicking up a cloud of dust as it lands on the cliff. This is the convoy unit of Rhodolan, the Empire's most secure floating prison. A dark-armored figure dismounts, ready to claim the high-profile prisoners. A figure wearing a sinister plague doctor mask steps forward, formally greeting Nabiros. Nabiro hands over the bound cultists, warning the convoy that the male prisoner possesses a strange, rapid healing ability. The masked figure is highly intrigued, noting their interrogator will be delighted to break such a unique specimen. With the bound cultists dragged aboard, the plague doctor promises to contact Nabiros once the interrogation yields results. The massive feathered beast takes flight, soaring into the dark night sky. Ronan and Nabiros watch the floating prison's transport disappear, knowing their answers lie within its walls. Nabiros turns to Ronan, telling him to stay on standby. As soon as Rhodolan calls, she promises to let him join the interrogation. Ronan nods respectfully, his mind already racing with the dark secrets they might uncover about Nebula Clavier and the impending invasion. In the weeks that follow, Grand Cappadocia begins its rapid restoration, while Ronan returns to his intense training at the academy. Meanwhile, deep within the damp stone corridors of Rhodolan, a sadistic interrogator in a plague doctor mask prepares his torture tools, eagerly awaiting the arrival of his special guest. Ronan and Nabarro step into the cold stone corridors of Rhodolan prison. They are greeted by an older man in a military uniform who introduces himself as Karaka, the interrogator assigned to handle the newly captured cultists. Karaka politely gestures for them to follow him down the hall, offering to summarize the situation as they walk. Ronan is surprised by how kind and gentle the old man seems, but Nabaros warns him not to trust appearances. As they walk deeper into the dimly lit, fire-lit stone hallway, Karaka explains that the cell is not far. He begins to outline the true danger of the prisoners they captured, warning that their organization is far more sinister than simple poachers. Nabiros asks if they are a criminal syndicate like Calaboro. Karaka shakes his head, explaining that because their identity is completely unknown, they are infinitely more dangerous, operating behind several massive, unexplained incidents over the past year. Ronan grows deeply concerned. He realizes that even in his past life, he had never heard of this secretive group. He politely asks Karaka if they can look over the specific reports. Ronan hesitates, then asks if the prisoners have revealed anything about their ultimate goal. Karaka stops walking, his expression turning solemn as he reaches for a terrifying plague doctor mask, indicating that the real interrogation is about to begin. As Karaka holds the mask, an ominous aura fills the corridor. Ronan feels a sudden icy shiver run down his spine, realizing the polite old man is about to transform into a monster. Donning the mask, Karaka's voice turns cold and menacing. He mutters that he hasn't shown the prisoners his full sincerity yet, and that he has no choice but to put far more effort into it. Ronan reacts with shock and confusion as memories of brutal military interrogations flash through his mind. He remembers the tragic, bloody faces of prisoners from his past life, steeling himself for what lies ahead. They enter the torture chamber, where Erdogan is bound in heavy chains. Karaka explains that Erdogan's specialized regeneration magic makes him a highly amusing subject, as they can burn him repeatedly without killing him. Karaka brutally presses a glowing, red-hot iron against Erdogan's chest, causing the cultist to scream in absolute agony. The interrogator sadistically claims that this painful process is how they will eventually become best friends. Ronan and Nabarose watch the horrific display in silence. Karaka sighs, expressing deep disappointment that despite all the pain, Erdogan is still stubbornly hiding the core secrets of his organization, refusing to speak of their true plans. Karaka aggressively grabs Erdogan's white hair, pulling his head back as the prisoner screams that he has already told them everything. Karaka demands to know why he is only now hearing about the star's advent. Karaka then turns his terrifying gaze towards Cirilla, who is blindfolded and bleeding. He notes that since she cannot regenerate, further torture will easily kill her, prompting Cirilla to desperately beg for death. As Erdogan whimpers in fear, Ronan strokes his chin, analyzing the situation. He speaks up, suggesting that instead of Erdogan stubbornly refusing to talk, it is highly likely that he physically cannot speak. Nabiros looks at Ronan in surprise. Ronan explains that the military often uses powerful silence curses on soldiers to protect secrets, and Karaka realizes with a sense of shame that he missed this possibility. Karaka leaves briefly and returns with a grotesque, fleshy creature sporting a single massive yellow eye. He explains to the startled onlookers that this horrifying monster is a cursed eye, which feeds entirely on curses. Karaka explains that these creatures are incredibly helpful for interrogating cursed criminals. He approaches the chained Erdogan with a menacing smile and allows the grotesque beast to latch directly onto the prisoner's head to begin its feast. Erdogan screams in pure agony as swirling purple energy erupts around him. The cursed eye's pupil glows bright blue as it greedily devours the restrictive silence curse binding the cultist's soul, leaving him completely exhausted. With the curse successfully devoured, Erdogan pants heavily. Cirilla suddenly speaks up in a trance, declaring that they are working to ensure nothing interferes with their long-cherished wish as the lights wait beyond the skies. Karaka asks them to put it simply, questioning if something is falling from the sky. Erdogan, with blood running down his face, gasps out the terrifying truth of their goal: the star's children. Ronan stands frozen in absolute shock as Erdogan mutters the name of the giant demon that destroyed his entire future, a Hayut. The dark realization settles in, confirming that the catastrophic invasion is already in motion. Ronan stands directly over the chained, bloody cultist, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. He demands to know how a mere cultist could possibly know the name of a Hayut, the giant demon destined to lay waste to the world. Erdogan freezes, his eyes widening in absolute panic. Cold sweat and blood drip down his face as he looks up at Ronan in sheer dread, utterly terrified that a mere academy student knows their deepest, most classified secret. Before the cultist can utter another word, a sudden, violent change occurs. Ronan recoils in alarm as a glowing red magic circle abruptly flares to life on Erdogan's forehead, pulsing with a volatile, destructive energy. With a deafening blast, Erdogan's head violently explodes in a blinding flash of light. When the smoke finally clears, nothing remains of the cultist but a pile of charred, smoking bones chained to the stone floor. Ronan stares in grim frustration at the smoking remains, cursing their terrible luck. Interrogator Karaka sighs behind his plague mask, admitting that while this is rare, the cult's security measures are far more extreme than they anticipated. Karaka analyzes the ashes, realizing the curse was cast in two distinct parts. The first part kept the victim silent, but the second part acted as a lethal failsafe, instantly executing them if they dared to reveal the cult's ultimate secrets. Karaka suddenly turns his sharp gaze onto Ronan, demanding to know what a Hayut actually is. He notes that such a name must be highly classified information within Nebula Clavier, raising deep suspicions about how Ronan learned it. The interrogator steps closer, his hand beginning to glow with a menacing red magical aura. He pressures Ronan to speak, demanding a clear answer as the tension in the stone room reaches a suffocating breaking point. Ronan quickly plays it cool, claiming he merely eavesdropped on the cultists back in the underground city of Grand Carpadoki. Karaka places a gloved hand on Ronan's shoulder, pretending to accept the excuse while secretly remaining highly skeptical. As Karaka slowly pulls his hand away, he studies the intense, burning fire in Ronan's golden eyes. He senses that the boy is hiding a massive secret, yet he decides Ronan is not a threat to the Empire. Suddenly, a brilliant green energy slash cuts through the air. Grand Sword St. Nabiros draws her blade in a flash, pointing the sharp steel directly at Karaka's face and warning him to back off from her students. Karaka quickly raises his hands in surrender, assuring the formidable Sword Saint that he was merely double-checking. He backs away, knowing better than to provoke the wrath of the Empire's most dangerous warrior. But the peace is short-lived. Karaka looks down in shock as his cursed eye creature begins to violently twitch and warp. He realizes the beast absorbed something terrifying from Ronan during that brief shoulder touch. The small, multi-eyed creature is suddenly transferred to Ronan's hand, where it begins to glow with an unstable, blinding blue light. Ronan looks down in sheer panic as the creature croaks in agony. The creature violently explodes in Ronan's hand, sending a shockwave through the room. Ronan recoils in pain, clutching his neck, while Karaka watches in utter disbelief that the cursed eye couldn't even handle Ronan's energy. Karaka looks at his stained gloves and delivers a shocking revelation. He tells Ronan that he is bound by a curse, asking if he has ever felt strange physical restrictions during his day-to-day movements. Ronan stands in stunned silence as the truth finally clicks. Karaka warns him that this curse is incredibly powerful, carrying a massive amount of ill intent that actively restricts his body and his mana control. Nabiros crosses her arms, ordering Karaka to report any findings immediately. Ronan walks out of the dark prison corridors, his mind racing as he tries to process the terrifying reality of the curse bound to his soul. As they leave, a gray-haired officer reassures Ronan, reminding him that Philian Academy holds many secrets. Meanwhile, in the shadows, a mysterious hooded figure with a single glowing blue eye watches, hinting at the dangerous path ahead.